On Christmas Eve, my son sent me a message that didn't sound like fear. It sounded like a warning. He begged me not to come to his house. He said it was for my safety. I didn't ask questions. I got in my truck and drove through the snow. That night, I walked into his basement and found my son chained to a water heater, his legs shattered, barely conscious, while his wife's family laughed upstairs drinking champagne. They thought I was just an old man with nothing left. By sunrise, they learned how wrong that assumption was. Hey everyone, before this story continues, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I want to know how far this story is reaching tonight. One important note, parts of what you're about to hear are dramatized for clarity and educational impact. Any overlap with real people or places is coincidental, but the lesson itself is real and worth hearing. It was 8 in the evening and the snow was coming down hard over Detroit. I was sitting in my recliner staring at the small plastic tree I had set up in the corner of my living room. At 68 years old, Christmas does not mean much when you live alone. My wife passed 5 years ago and my son Trayvon was usually busy with his architectural firm or his wife Kylie. I expected a phone call, maybe a card, but not much else. I am a simple man to the outside world. I drive a 2015 Ford F-150 that has seen better days. I wear flannel shirts and work boots. Most people look at me and see a retired laborer living on a pension. That is exactly what I want them to see. They do not know about the 40 years I spent building infrastructure across this state. They do not know about the commercial real estate portfolio I manage quietly from my home office. They do not know that I could buy their entire neighborhood with a single wire transfer. I learned a long time ago that silence is power. My phone buzzed on the side table. The screen lit up with a message from Trayvon. I smiled, thinking he was wishing me a Merry Christmas. But when I read the words, my blood ran cold. Dad, do not come over. Stay away. They are here. It is dangerous. I am sorry. I stared at the screen. Trayvon was a strong man. He was 32 years old, 6 feet tall, and built like a linebacker. He did not scare easily. For him to send a message like that meant something was terribly wrong. I did not reply. I did not call him back to ask questions. I stood up and walked to my bedroom closet. Inside the floor safe, I keep my old Colt 1911. I took it out and checked the magazine. It was full. I hoped I would not have to use it, but I had a feeling tonight was not going to be about exchanging gifts. I put on my heavy coat, grabbed my keys, and walked out into the storm. The drive to Grosse Pointe usually took 30 minutes, but with the ice on the roads, it took 45. I drove with a singular focus. My hands gripped the steering wheel tight enough to turn my knuckles white. Trayvon lived in a gated community, but I knew the code. I had paid for the house after all, though nobody but Trayvon and my lawyer knew that. To Kylie and her family, I was just the old man who fixed things around the house for free. I pulled my truck onto the street a block away from Trayvon's driveway. I killed the lights and the engine. The snow was falling silently, covering everything in a blanket of white, but the house down the street was blazing with light. I walked the rest of the way, sticking to the shadows of the large oak trees that lined the street. The cold air bit at my face, but I barely felt it. My eyes were fixed on the large bay windows of the living room. The curtains were wide open, as if the people inside wanted the world to see their celebration. I crept closer, stepping over a low hedge until I had a clear view inside. What I saw made my jaw tighten. There were people everywhere, but Trayvon was not among them. I recognized Buck and Misty immediately. They were Kylie's parents. They were the kind of people who smiled to your face and made jokes about your skin color the moment you turned your back. I had tolerated them for Trayvon's sake, but I never trusted them. Buck was wearing a tuxedo that looked strained around his midsection. He was standing in the middle of my son's living room holding a bottle of vintage champagne. I recognized the label. It was a bottle I had given Trayvon for his 5th anniversary, a bottle worth $3,000. Buck was shaking it, spraying the foam onto the hardwood floors while a group of strangers cheered. Misty was lounging on the Italian leather sofa wearing a fur coat that I knew belonged to Trayvon's mother. She was laughing, her head thrown back, a glass of wine in one hand and a cigarette in the other. Ashes were falling onto the pristine white rug. The disrespect was palpable. They were trashing the house, treating it like a cheap motel room. But where was Trayvon? Where was Kylie? I scanned the room again. I saw Kylie near the fireplace. She was wearing a red silk dress, looking radiant and holding court with a group of people I did not recognize. She looked happy, too happy. There was no sign of distress, no sign that her husband was missing from his own Christmas party. If Trayvon was in danger, why was his wife partying? The pieces did not fit, and that terrified me more than anything. I knew I could not just knock on the front door. If they were hiding something, they would have time to cover it up. I needed to find my son first. I circled around to the side of the house toward the 3-car garage. The snow was deeper here, drifting against the brick walls. I tried the service door. It was locked. I took out my pocket knife and slid the blade between the jamb and the latch. It was an old trick I learned on construction sites when keys went missing. The lock clicked, and the door swung open silently. I slipped inside and closed it behind me. The garage was dark but warm. The smell hit me instantly. It was not the smell of gasoline or oil. It was the sharp chemical sting of bleach mixed with the copper tang of something else, something organic. I took out a small flashlight and swept the beam across the space. Trayvon's SUV was there, and so was Kylie's convertible. But there was a third car, a rusted van with mud caked on the tires parked awkwardly in the third bay. It did not belong here. I moved past the vehicles toward the door that led to the laundry room and the basement stairs. The smell got stronger. It smelled like sickness, like a hospital waiting room that hadn't been cleaned in weeks. I opened the door to the mudroom. The house music was thumping above me, a rhythmic bass that vibrated the floorboards. I could hear footsteps dancing overhead. I moved toward the basement door. It was slightly ajar. A faint light was coming from the bottom of the stairs. I descended slowly, placing my feet on the edges of the steps to avoid creaking. The air grew colder as I went down. The basement was finished, a large recreational space with a pool table and a home theater. But that was not where the light was coming from. It was coming from the unfinished utility room in the back corner where the furnace and water heater were located. I pushed the utility door open and my heart stopped. My son was there. But he was not the man I knew. Trayvon was curled up on the bare concrete floor in a fetal position. He was wearing only a pair of soiled boxer shorts and a thin undershirt. His skin was ashen gray, covered in a sheen of cold sweat. He was shivering violently, but it was his leg that made me cover my mouth to stop a gasp. His right leg was swollen to nearly twice its normal size. The skin was tight and shiny, turning a gruesome shade of purple and black around the shin. It was bent at an unnatural angle. It was broken badly and untreated. And then I saw the chain. A heavy industrial steel chain was wrapped around his left ankle, secured with a thick padlock. The other end was looped around the main copper pipe feeding the water heater. My son, a man who designed skyscrapers, a man who had built a life of dignity, was chained like a dog in his own home. I rushed to his side and fell to my knees. The concrete was freezing. I touched his shoulder. "Trayvon," I whispered. His body tensed and he let out a whimper of pain. He flinched as if he expected to be hit. It broke me. It shattered my heart into a million pieces. "Trayvon, it is me. It is Dad." He opened his eyes slowly. They were glassy and unfocused, the pupils pinned to tiny dots. He looked at me, but I wasn't sure he recognized me. "Dad," he croaked. His voice was a dry rasp, like sandpaper on stone. "You came. I told you not to come. I am here, son. I am getting you out of here." I reached for the chain, pulling on it, testing its strength. It was solid. I needed bolt cutters or a key. I looked at his leg. "God, Trayvon, who did this to you?" He tried to sit up but collapsed back onto the concrete, groaning. "Kylie," he whispered. Tears leaked from his eyes, mixing with the grime on his face. Kylie and her father. Buck used a baseball bat. They did it 3 days ago. 3 days. He had been down here for 3 days with a broken leg. The rage that filled me was white hot. I wanted to go upstairs and end every single person in that house. But I looked at my son, and I knew he needed medical attention more than I needed revenge. Not yet. "Why, son? Why are they doing this? They want me to sign," he gasped, fighting for breath. "The power of attorney. They want control of the accounts. They want the house. They have been injecting me, Dad. Heroin, fentanyl. I don't know. They want to make me look like an addict, so when I die, it looks like an overdose." The horror of their plan washed over me. It was not just a robbery, it was a slow execution. They were torturing him, breaking his body and poisoning his blood to steal what he had earned. They were going to kill him and frame him for his own death. "You have to run, Dad." Trayvon grabbed my hand, his grip weak and clammy. "If they find you down here, they will kill you too. They have guns. Buck has his hunting rifle. Please go." "I am not leaving you," I said firmly. But I knew I couldn't carry him. Not with that leg, and I couldn't break the chain. I needed a plan. I needed to be smart. I was outnumbered and my son was in critical condition. If I started a firefight now, Trayvon might get caught in the crossfire. Just then the music upstairs stopped for a moment between songs. In the silence I heard the sharp click-clack of high heels on the hardwood floor above us. The footsteps were coming toward the basement door. Hyde Trayvon hissed, his eyes wide with terror. "She is coming." I looked around the small utility room. There was a large metal storage cabinet against the wall filled with paint cans and tools. It was my only option. I squeezed myself into the narrow space behind it, pulling the shadows around me. I held my breath, my hand resting on the grip of my pistol. The basement door opened. Light flooded down the stairs. I heard a woman's voice humming a Christmas carol. It was Kylie. She sounded happy. She sounded like an angel. But as she descended the stairs, the humming stopped. "Wake up, sleeping beauty," she said, her voice changing instantly from melodic to venomous. She walked into the utility room. Through the crack between the cabinet and the wall, I could see her. She was holding a plastic bowl of what looked like watery oatmeal. She stood over my son, looking down at him with pure disgust. "Did you miss me?" she asked. She nudged his broken leg with the pointed toe of her stiletto. Trayvon screamed, a raw, guttural sound of agony that echoed off the concrete walls. "Oops, sorry, honey," she giggled. "I brought you Christmas dinner, but you only get to eat if you sign the papers. Are you ready to be a good boy, or do you want another injection?" I watched my hand trembling on my gun. It took every ounce of discipline I had not to put a bullet in her right then and there. But I needed to get Trayvon out alive. I needed to be a ghost. I took out my phone and silently pressed record. This was only the beginning. I squeezed myself tighter into the gap between the metal cabinet and the cold concrete wall. The shadows were my only shield. Through the narrow slit, I watched the woman my son had married. Kylie stood there in her red silk dress, holding a plastic bowl of oatmeal like it was a weapon. She looked beautiful. That was the most terrifying part. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, and diamonds glittered at her throat. She looked like a Christmas angel who had just descended into hell to torment the damned. "Sign the papers, Trayvon," she said. Her voice was soft, almost loving. It was the voice a mother uses to coax a child to eat his vegetables. "Just pick up the pen, baby. Sign the transfer of power, and I will let you have some water. I will even put some sugar in this oatmeal. You are hungry, aren't you?" Trayvon let out a dry rattle from his chest. He tried to lift his head, but he was too weak. His neck muscles strained against the exhaustion. "Water," he croaked. "Please, Kylie." "Water," she tutted, shaking her head mockingly. "Not yet. You know the rules. Sign first, then water. Then maybe if you are really good, I will give you a painkiller for that nasty leg. It looks like it hurts so much." She leaned down, and I tensed my grip on the pistol. I could see the sweat beading on Trayvon's forehead. The smell of infection from his leg was overpowering down here, mixing with the damp scent of the basement. Kylie did not seem to mind. She hovered over him, enjoying his misery. She dipped a spoon into the cold oatmeal and held it just inches from his cracked lips. Trayvon opened his mouth, instinctively desperate for any kind of sustenance. Kylie pulled the spoon back at the last second, letting the gray slop splatter onto his bare chest. "Oops," she giggled. "Look at you. You are such a mess. You cannot even feed yourself. This is why you need me to take control of the accounts, Trayvon. You are unfit. You are a junkie. You are pathetic." I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. The rage was a physical pressure in my chest, expanding like hot gas. I wanted to step out from behind that cabinet and end her. It would be so easy. 2 steps, 1 shot, it would be justice. But I was a man who had built skyscrapers. I knew that if you destroy the foundation without a plan, the whole building comes down on top of you. If I killed her now, her parents upstairs would hear the shot. They would come down with their guns. My son was chained and immobile. He would be caught in the crossfire. And even if we won, the police in this town belonged to her uncle. They would paint me as the crazy father-in-law who broke in and murdered a young mother on Christmas. I had to wait. I had to be stoned. Kylie stood up, abruptly, bored with her game. She tossed the bowl onto the floor. It landed near Trayvon's head, spilling the rest of the oatmeal into the dirt. "Eat it off the floor if you want it," she said, coldness replacing the fake sweetness. Her phone began to ring. She pulled it from her purse and checked the screen. Her face lit up. She swiped to answer and pressed the phone to her ear, turning away from Trayvon but staying in the room. I held my breath and carefully angled my own phone to ensure the microphone caught every word. "Hey, baby," she said. Her voice changed again. It was husky, intimate. It was not the voice of a wife speaking to a friend. No, do not worry about him. He is down here now. He is practically a vegetable. She paced back and forth, her high heels clicking on the concrete like the ticking of a bomb. Yeah, I gave him another dose an hour ago, a big one. Fentanyl mixed with those horse tranquilizers my dad got. He does not even know what day it is. He thinks it is still Tuesday. She laughed, a cruel, tinkling sound that made my skin crawl. Listen, we need to speed this up. The bank called about the liquidity hold on his firm's account. They are getting suspicious about why the CEO has not been seen in 3 weeks. We need that signature tonight. If he dies before he signs the transfer into the trust, the money goes into probate, and his old man might contest it. I listened, my heart hammering against my ribs. Trayvon was not just a successful architect. He was the CEO of Mercer Design Group, a firm that had reshaped the skyline of Detroit. He had assets worth millions, properties, patents, investments. I had taught him how to build wealth, how to protect it, but I had never taught him how to protect himself from a woman like this. I had failed him. Kylie paused, listening to the person on the other end. Don't worry, she said dismissively. We have the narrative set. Everyone thinks he relapsed. I have been posting sad updates on Facebook for weeks asking for prayers for his addiction battle. When he finally kicks the bucket, everyone will say it was a tragedy, but nobody will be surprised. The grieving widow gets the sympathy and the portfolio. It is perfect. She twirled a lock of her blonde hair around her finger, staring blankly at the wall right next to my hiding spot. She was so close I could smell her expensive perfume. It was a floral scent, sickly sweet, masking the rot of her soul. Yeah, Dad is upstairs keeping the guests entertained, she continued. He is drinking the 60-year-old scotch. Can you believe Trayvon was saving that for a special occasion? Well, I guess my financial freedom is a special occasion, right? She laughed again. Okay, I have to go back up. People are asking where the hostess is. I will try to get the signature again later. If not, maybe Dad can break his other leg. That might motivate him. I love you too. See you soon. She hung up and slipped the phone back into her purse. She looked at Trayvon one last time. He was groaning softly, his eyes closed. Do us both a favor and just die already, she whispered. Then she turned and walked out of the room. The heavy metal door slammed shut at the top of the stairs, and I heard the lock click. The music from the party upstairs muffled the sound of her footsteps fading away. I waited a full minute, counting the seconds in my head to make sure she was not coming back. 60 seconds of agonizing silence. Then I stepped out from behind the cabinet. Trayvon, I whispered, rushing to his side. He flinched violently, trying to curl into a tighter ball. No, no, please, he whimpered. I will sign. Just stop. It is me, son. It is Dad. I am not going to hurt you. I knelt beside him, avoiding the spilled oatmeal. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a small bottle of water I always kept in the truck. I unscrewed the cap and gently lifted his head. Drink this, I said, slowly. He drank greedily, water spilling down his chin. He coughed, choking a little, but he kept drinking until the bottle was empty. His eyes cleared slightly. The water seemed to wash away some of the haze. Dad, he rasped, you have to leave. They locked the door. I know, I said. I looked at the chain around his ankle. Up close it was even worse. The skin underneath the metal was raw and bleeding. The padlock was a heavy-duty master lock, the kind used for shipping containers. I grabbed the chain with both hands and pulled, bracing my foot against the water heater. It did not budge. It was hardened steel. I would need bolt cutters or an angle grinder. My pocket knife was useless here. I looked around the room frantically. There were paint cans, screwdrivers, a hammer. Nothing that could cut steel. I tried to pick the lock with a piece of wire from the floor, but my hands were shaking too much and the mechanism was rusted shut. Damn it, I hissed. Trayvon grabbed my wrist. His grip was weak, his hand burning with fever. Stop, Dad. You cannot break it. Go. Get the police. I cannot call the police, Trayvon. The sheriff is her uncle. If I call them, they will warn her. They will move you or they will kill you before help arrives. I need to get you out myself. I took out my phone again. Hold still, son. I need to document this. I took photos of his leg, the purple swelling, the unnatural angle of the bone pressing against the skin. I took photos of the chain. I took photos of the needle marks on his arm. Every flash of the camera felt like an indignity, but I knew these images would be the nails in their coffins. I am coming back, I promised him, my voice trembling with suppressed emotion. I am going to walk out of here, and I am going to come back through the front door. What Traven's eyes widened. No. They will kill you. Buck has a shotgun by the door. They won't kill me if I am standing in front of their guests, I said. They are arrogant, Traven. They think I am just a stupid old man. They think I am weak. I am going to use that. I stood up. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. Leaving my son chained to a pipe in the dark while his tormentors danced above our heads tore me apart. But I knew that brute force would fail. I needed to be smarter. I needed to be the fox, not the lion. I checked the door at the top of the stairs. Locked. I went back to the garage door. It was still unlocked from my entry. I slipped out into the cold, dark garage. The music was still thumping. I took a deep breath of the freezing air, clearing the smell of sickness from my lungs. I walked out of the garage and circled back to the street. The snow was falling harder now, covering my tracks. I went to my truck and opened the glove box. I took out a small wrapped box. It was a fruitcake. A stale, store-bought fruitcake I had picked up days ago for a neighbor. It was the perfect prop. I adjusted my coat, making sure my gun was hidden but accessible. I messed up my hair a little, hunched my shoulders, and put on the mask I had worn for years. The mask of the harmless, confused old retiree. I walked up the driveway past the luxury cars that belonged to my son, but were being driven by his murderers. I climbed the steps to the front porch. I could hear the laughter inside. I could hear the clinking of glasses. I reached out and pressed the doorbell. Ding dong. The sound cut through the party noise. I waited. My heart was a cold stone in my chest. I was walking into the lion's den armed with nothing but a fruitcake and a lie. But they had made one fatal mistake. They had forgotten who I was. They saw a victim. They were about to meet the executioner. The door swung open and the warmth of the house hit me like a physical blow. It smelled of roasted turkey, expensive perfume, and the underlying scent of pine needles. Kylie stood in the doorway, framed by the golden light of the foyer. For a split second, her face was a mask of pure shock. Her blue eyes went wide, and her mouth fell open slightly. She looked like she had seen a ghost, and in a way she had. To her, I was supposed to be the invisible old man forgotten in his recliner on the other side of town. I was supposed to be a non-factor. Silas. She hissed, her voice low so the guests behind her would not hear. What are you doing here? I told Trayvon to tell you not to come. I hunched my shoulders forward, making myself look smaller. I clutched the fruitcake box with both hands, letting them tremble just enough to sell the performance. I blinked rapidly as if the lights were too bright for my old eyes. I just wanted to drop off a gift, Kylie. I mumbled, my voice raspy and weak. It is Christmas. I haven't seen the boy in weeks. Is he home? She stepped forward, trying to block my path with her body. She looked over my shoulder, scanning the street as if checking to see if I had brought the police. When she saw only my rusted truck parked down the block, her shoulders relaxed, but her eyes remained cold. He is not here, Silas, she lied effortlessly. He is sick. He does not want to see you. You need to leave, now. She started to close the door, her hand pressing firmly against the wood. I jammed the toe of my heavy work boot into the gap. It was a subtle move, but it stopped the door dead. She looked down at my boot, then up at my face, her expression twisting into a snarl. I said leave, she whispered, venom dripping from every word. But it was too late. Behind her, the chatter of the party had lulled. A woman in a sequined dress holding a martini glass had spotted me. Oh, Kylie, the woman called out, her voice slurring slightly. Is that Trayvon's father? Invite him in. It is freezing out there. Kylie froze. She was trapped. She prided herself on being the perfect hostess, the benevolent socialite. She could not slam the door on a shivering old man in front of her audience. It would shatter the illusion she had crafted so carefully. She forced a smile onto her face. It looked painful, like the skin might split. Of course, she said, her voice rising an octave to sound cheerful. Come in, Silas. We were just surprised to see you. She stepped back and I shuffled inside. The foyer was grand with marble floors that I had personally sourced from Italy 10 years ago when I built this place. Now those floors were covered in wet snow from my boots. I made sure to stomp them, leaving dirty puddles of gray slush on the pristine white stone. Kylie winced with every stomp, but she kept smiling. Let me take your coat, she said, reaching for my old canvas jacket. No, thank you, I said, clutching it tighter. I get a chill easily these days. I will keep it on. I needed the coat. My Colt 1911 was tucked into the waistband of my pants at the small of my back, hidden by the heavy fabric. I walked past her into the main living room. The party was in full swing. There were about 20 people, mostly white, mostly wealthy, and all of them staring at me. I stood out like a sore thumb. They were wearing tuxedos and silk gowns. I was wearing flannel jeans stained with oil and boots caked with mud. I saw the looks of disgust ripple through the room. They wrinkled their noses. They whispered behind their hands. I was the dirt they tried so hard to keep out of their gated communities, and here I was standing on their Persian rug. Well, look who the cat dragged in. The booming voice came from the center of the room. It was Buck Kiley's father. He strode toward me holding a crystal tumbler of whiskey. His tuxedo jacket was unbuttoned, straining against his large gut. His face was flushed red from alcohol and heat. "Silas," he said loudly, making a show of it, "we didn't think you would make it. We thought the snow might be too much for that old truck of yours. Did it break down in the driveway?" The guests laughed. It was a cruel, polite laughter. "It runs fine, Buck," I said, keeping my head down, playing the part. "Just wanted to see the family." Misty Kiley's mother unpeeled herself from the sofa and sauntered over. She looked me up and down, her lip curling in a sneer. She adjusted the fur coat she was wearing. I recognized it instantly. It was a mink coat Trayvon had bought for his mother the Christmas before she died. Seeing this woman wearing my late wife's coat made my vision blur with rage. I had to bite my tongue so hard I tasted iron. "You are dripping on the rug, Silas," she said, taking a drag from her cigarette. "That represents 6 months of your pension. Try to have some respect for nice things." "I apologize, ma'am," I mumbled, shuffling my feet and making a point to grind a little more dirt into the fibers. "Where is Trayvon?" I asked, looking around the room. I wanted to hear them say it. I wanted to hear the lie. Kiley stepped up beside her father and placed a hand on his arm. She looked sad. She looked like a martyr. "Oh, Silas," she sighed. "We didn't want to worry you. Trayvon had a relapse." "A relapse," I repeated, feigning confusion. "Yes," she continued, lowering her voice to a stage whisper so everyone could hear. "The drugs. He has been spiraling for weeks. We had to send him to a facility this morning. He was out of control, Silas. He was dangerous." The crowd murmured sympathetically. "Poor Kiley," they whispered. "Dealing with a junkie husband. She is so strong." I felt the phone in my pocket recording every word. She was painting my son as a monster while she kept him chained like an animal beneath our feet. "That is terrible," I said, shaking my head. "My poor boy. Is he okay? He is where he needs to be." Buck interrupted. He took a swig of his drink. "Don't you worry about him, old-timer. We are taking care of everything. We are handling the accounts, the house, the business. Someone has to be the adult in the room, right?" He raised his glass in a mock toast. As he did, the sleeve of his tuxedo slid up and I saw it. The gold Rolex Submariner. The blue dial caught the light from the chandelier. I knew that watch. I had bought it for Trayvon when he graduated with his master's degree. I had engraved the back with the words, "Build your legacy." "That is a fine watch, Buck," I said, pointing a shaking finger at his wrist. "Looks expensive." Buck laughed, looking down at the timepiece. He puffed out his chest. "Yeah, it is a beauty, isn't it? A little gift from my son-in-law. He gave it to me before he left. Said he wanted a real man to wear it so it wouldn't get pawned for dope. Liar. Thief. Vulture." The insults screamed in my mind, but I kept my face blank. "Wow," I said. "He must really love you." "We are family." Silas Misty chimed in, blowing smoke toward the ceiling. "Real family helps each other. Speaking of help, did you come here to beg for money again? Because the Bank of Trayvon is closed until he gets clean." I saw the guests leaning in, enjoying the show. To them, I was just a beggar, a leech. "No, ma'am," I said, reaching into my coat pocket. "I actually came to give a gift. It is Christmas after all." I pulled out a crumpled white envelope. It was stained with a little bit of coffee from my truck's cup holder. I held it out with a trembling hand. Buck snatched it from my fingers. He ripped it open, tearing the paper aggressively. He pulled out the contents. It was a single $100 bill, old and soft from circulation. He held it up for the room to see, pinching the corner like it was a dirty tissue. "Look at this, everyone," he announced, booming with laughter. "Big spender, a whole $100. What should we do with this, Kiley? Buy a single bottle of water." The room erupted in laughter. It was a sound of pure mockery. "You keep it," Silas, Misty said, flicking ash onto the floor. You probably need it for gas money to get that heap of junk home. Buy yourself a new shirt, old man, Buck added, stuffing the bill into my flannel pocket and patting my chest hard. One that doesn't smell like grease and failure. This was it. The moment I had been waiting for. They were drunk on their own arrogance. They felt untouchable. They thought I was nothing but a bug they could squash under their heels. They had let their guard down. I let my shoulders sag even further. I looked down at the floor, letting the shame wash over me, or at least the appearance of it. I guess you are right, I mumbled. I am just a foolish old man. I probably shouldn't have come. You got that right, Buck sneered, turning his back on me to refill his drink. I took a step toward the door, then stopped. I turned to Kylie, who was watching me with a look of bored contempt. I beckoned her closer with a crooked finger. Kylie, I whispered urgency in my voice. Before I go, there is one small thing. She rolled her eyes and stepped closer, checking her nails. What is it, Silas? Make it quick. I looked around, ensuring nobody else was close enough to hear. I leaned in until I was inches from her ear. I lowered my voice to a conspiratorial rasp. It is about the gift, I said. That $100 was all I had in my wallet. But I have something else in the truck, she sighed loudly. I do not want your old junk, Silas. No, listen, I hissed. It is a lottery ticket. I bought it yesterday at the gas station on 8 Mile. I checked the numbers this morning. I paused, letting the hook dangle. It is a winner, Kylie. $2 million. I felt her body tense. She stopped looking at her nails. She turned her head slowly to look at me. Her eyes narrowed, calculating. What did you say? She asked, her voice sharp. 2 million, I repeated. But there is a problem. I lost my ID last week. I cannot claim it. I need someone to sign the back of the ticket as a witness, and I need someone to claim it for me. I was going to ask Trevon. I thought if he signed for it, he could keep half, help him get back on his feet. I patted my chest pocket where a worthless piece of paper was folded neatly. But since he is gone, and since you folks clearly do not need the money, I guess I will just go. Maybe I can find a lawyer or someone downtown to help me on Monday. I turned to leave, taking a slow, shuffling step toward the door. Wait. Kylie grabbed my arm. Her grip was tight. Her fingernails dug into my coat. The contempt was gone from her face, replaced by a raw, hungry greed. It was the same look a shark gives when it smells blood in the water. $2 million, she whispered. You are sure? I checked it 3 times, I said, nodding my head vigorously like a bobblehead. All the numbers matched. But I am scared, Kylie. I do not know how to handle that kind of money. I do not trust those lawyers. They will steal it from an old man like me. She licked her lips. Her eyes darted to her parents, who were busy pouring more drinks, then back to me. I could see the gears turning in her head. $2 million was a lot of money even for them. It was liquid cash. It was untraceable if handled right. And most importantly, it was right there in the pocket of a stupid, senile old man. You do not need a lawyer, Silas, she said, her voice suddenly dripping with honey. That is what family is for. We can help you. But Trevon is not here, I said, acting distressed. I wanted him to have it. I am his wife, she said, squeezing my arm. What is his is mine, and what is mine is his. Mine is. If you give it to me, I will put it in our joint account. It will be waiting for him when he gets out of rehab. It will save him, Silas. She looked at me with wide, pleading eyes. It was a masterclass in manipulation. Really, I asked, my eyes wide with fake hope. You would do that for him. Of course, she smiled. I love him. And I love you, Dad. We want you to be taken care of, too. She looked over her shoulder at the party. Why don't we go somewhere quiet, she suggested. Just you and me. You can show me the ticket, and we can figure this out. We do not want to make a scene in front of the guests, right? I hesitated, pretending to think it over. Okay, I said. But I need Trevon's signature on the guarantor line. It is a specific type of ticket. It needs 2 family members. She froze for a second. He is not here, Silas, she repeated, her smile faltering slightly. I know, I said, rubbing my forehead in confusion. But maybe you have power of attorney. If you have his power of attorney, you can sign for him. Do you have that paper? Her eyes lit up. This was it. The trap was sprung. She needed that signature from Trayvon downstairs to get control of his assets. Now she thought she needed it to get my $2 million too. The pressure was compounding. I am working on that, she stammered. Well, I said, clutching my coat. If we cannot sign it tonight, I might just go home. My neighbor said he would drive me to the lottery commission on Tuesday. He said he would sign it for a small fee. No, she said, quickly, too quickly. No, do not trust neighbors. Listen, Silas. She looked around frantically. She made a decision. I could see it happen. The greed outweighed the risk. Trayvon is here, she whispered. He is upstairs, resting. He is very sick, but for this, I think I can wake him up. You lied to the guests, I asked, acting shocked. I had to protect his reputation, she said smoothly. You understand. Come with me, we will go see him. We will go see. She linked her arm through mine. It felt like being held by a snake. Okay, I said, take me to my son. She led me away from the party toward the hallway, but she did not lead me to the stairs going up. She glanced at her parents, gave them a subtle nod, and steered me toward the kitchen and the mudroom door beyond. She was taking me to the basement. She was taking me right back to the hell I had just escaped. But this time I was not hiding. I was walking in with the devil herself, and she had no idea that the old man on her arm was about to bring the whole house down. Kylie steered me into the kitchen away from the mudroom door. Her grip on my arm was iron tight, but her face was plastered with that sickeningly sweet smile she saved for the public. The kitchen was a disaster zone of catered trays and half-empty wine bottles. It smelled of turkey grease and expensive candles. Dad, you look famished, she cooed, pushing me down onto a bar stool at the marble island. You cannot sign important papers on an empty stomach. Let me get you a plate. We have turkey ham and the truffle mashed potatoes you like. I watched her bustling around the kitchen, her red dress swirling around her legs. She was playing the part of the doting daughter-in-law perfectly. It made my stomach turn. I knew that just beneath us, my son was starving and bleeding on a cold concrete floor while she offered me his food. That sounds lovely, Kylie, I said, forcing my voice to tremble. But we need to hurry. I was listening to the radio on the way over. They said the Lottery Commission is closing the fiscal yearbooks tonight at midnight. If we do not claim the ticket by then, it rolls over to next year and the taxes double. Or maybe it expires. I am so confused with all these rules. I rubbed my forehead, acting the part of the overwhelmed senior citizen. I needed to create urgency. I needed to make her panic. Panic makes people sloppy. Tonight, she asked, pausing with a carving knife in her hand. Are you sure, Silas? That does not sound right. I do not know, I stammered. That is what the man on the radio said. I do not want to lose half the money to the government, Kylie. $2 million is a lot, but $1 million is less. We need Trayvon's signature now. Can we just go see him? She set the knife down. The greed flared in her eyes again. She looked at the clock on the oven. It was almost 9. Eat first, she insisted, shoving a plate of cold turkey in front of me. I need to go check on him. He was sleeping heavily. I need to make sure he is decent before you go up. She patted my hand. Her skin was cold. You stay right here. Do not move. I will be right back. She turned and hurried out of the kitchen toward the living room where her parents were holding court. I watched her go. I did not touch the food. I knew better than to eat anything in this house. I slid off the stool and crept to the doorway, pressing my back against the wall so I could hear them. Kylie pulled Buck and Misty into a huddle near the wet bar. The music was loud, but I had spent 30 years on construction sites listening for the crack of a support beam over the roar of diesel engines. I could hear a whisper in a hurricane. He has a winning ticket, Buck said, his voice low and guttural. $2 million. He showed me the receipt. He did not show you the ticket, though, Misty countered, taking a drag from her cigarette. He is senile, Mom, Kylie hissed. He does not know what day it is. But if he leaves with that ticket, we lose everything. We need that money. The bank is going to foreclose on this house in a month if we do not get access to Trayvon's accounts. This ticket is a lifeline, so bring Trayvon up, Buck suggested. Clean him up, put him in a chair and make him sign. We cannot bring him up, Kylie whispered furiously. Look at the people here. If anyone sees his leg, Buck, you broke his femur. It is black and blue and twice the size it should be. He smells like a sewer. We cannot parade him through a Christmas party. Then take the old man down there, Misty said. And let him see his son chained to a water heater, Kylie snapped. Are you stupid? Silas might be old, but he has a big mouth. If he sees that, he will call the police. Silence hung between them for a moment. I could practically hear the gears grinding in their heads. They were trapped between their greed and their crimes. "Drug him," Buck said. His voice was flat, devoid of any morality. What Kylie asked. "Put something in the old man's drink, the same stuff you are giving Trayvon. Knock him out. Once he is unconscious, we take the ticket from his pocket. We forge Trayvon's signature on the guarantor line. When Silas wakes up tomorrow, we tell him he had a spell. We tell him he signed it and we already sent it in. He is confused enough he will believe it." My hand drifted to the gun at my back. They were discussing poisoning me just feet away from where I stood. "That could work," Kylie said slowly. "I have the liquid fentanyl in my purse. Just a few drops. He is old, so we have to be careful not to kill him. At least not here." "Do it," Misty ordered. "Get him a drink. Make it strong to cover the taste." I moved back to the bar stool and sat down, my heart hammering a rhythm against my ribs. They were escalating. They were desperate. I needed to move fast. Kylie breezed back into the kitchen a moment later. She was carrying 2 glasses of eggnog. She had a wide plastic smile plastered on her face, but her eyes were dead. "Here we go, Silas," she said cheerfully. "A Christmas toast while we wait for Trayvon to wake up. I put a little bourbon in yours just the way you like it, to warm your bones." She placed the glass in front of me. The liquid was thick and creamy, dusted with nutmeg. It looked innocent. It looked lethal. "Thank you, dear," I said, staring at the glass. "You are so thoughtful." "Oh." "Drink up," she urged, watching me intently. I lifted the glass. The smell of bourbon was strong, masking any chemical odor. I brought it to my lips. Kylie held her breath. Just then a burst of laughter erupted from the living room. Someone had dropped a glass. "Oh my heavens," I exclaimed, feigning a startled response. My hand jerked and I sloshed the eggnog over the rim of the glass and onto the marble counter. "Careful," Kylie snapped, her patience fraying. "I am so sorry," I apologized, grabbing a handful of napkins. "I am so clumsy these days." While she turned to grab a towel to help me clean up the mess, I moved with the speed of a man half my age. I poured the contents of the glass into the large potted fern sitting on the center island. By the time she turned back, the glass was empty and I was wiping my mouth with a napkin. "That was delicious," I said, exhaling satisfied. "Really hits the spot." "You drank it all?" she asked, looking at the empty glass, then at me. Every drop, I lied, but oh my. "But..." I clutched my stomach and groaned. My face twisted in fake pain. "What is it?" she asked, stepping back. "My stomach," I moaned. "That rich food, the bourbon. Oh dear. I think I need to use the restroom immediately." "The guest bathroom is down the hall," she said, pointing toward the foyer. No, I said, shaking my head. "I cannot be seen by those people. I am embarrassed." "Is there another one?" "Use the one in the mudroom," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "Just go." It was exactly what I wanted. The mudroom was next to the garage entrance and the basement door. "Thank you," I gasped, grabbing my midsection and shuffling away as fast as my old man act would allow. I hurried into the mudroom and closed the door behind me, locking it. I paused, listening. The music was loud enough to cover my movements. I did not go to the bathroom. I went straight to the basement door. I opened it and slipped into the darkness. I moved down the stairs quickly, no longer worrying about the creaks. I pulled my flashlight from my pocket. Trayvon looked up as I entered the utility room. He looked worse than before. His head was lolling and his breathing was shallow. "Dad," he whispered, "you came back. I told you I would," I said, kneeling beside him. I took out a small plastic bag from my pocket, the kind I used to keep screws in. "I need you to be brave, son," I said. "I need evidence. I need them to know exactly what they put in your veins." I took his arm. There was a fresh puncture mark near the crook of his elbow, oozing a tiny drop of blood. I used a clean corner of my handkerchief to swab the blood and then sealed the cloth in the bag. Then I reached into my other pocket and pulled out a pair of nail clippers I kept on my keychain. I clipped a lock of his hair, sealing that in a separate bag. These samples would go to a private lab tonight. By morning, I would have a toxicology report that would prove attempted murder. "They are trying to drug me too," I told him, my voice low and hard. "They think I am upstairs passing out." Trayvon gripped my arm, his fingers digging into my coat. "Dad, look." He pointed to the corner of the room behind the water heater. I shined my light there. Hidden in the shadows was a shovel, a bag of lime, and a roll of thick plastic sheeting. "They are digging a hole in the crawl space," he said, tears streaming down his face. "They were talking about it yesterday. They are not going to let me live, Dad, even if I sign." I looked at the tools of burial, and a cold calm settled over me. This was not a robbery. This was an execution in slow motion. "I know, son," I said. I holstered my flashlight and pulled out my gun, checking the safety. "I am going to get you out of here, but first I have to destroy their world." I heard the doorknob at the top of the stairs jiggle. Then a heavy pounding. Silas Kiley's voice came through the wood, muffled but angry. "Are you in there? Why is the mudroom door locked?" I looked at Traven. "Play dead," I whispered. "Do not move. Do not make a sound." I stood up and moved back into the shadows of the storage cabinet. But this time I wasn't hiding. I was waiting. The lock on the upstairs door clicked. She had a key. The door swung open. "Silas," she yelled. I did not answer. I let the silence of the basement rise up to meet her. She took a step down, then another. She was coming to check her trap. But she had forgotten that when you corner a wounded animal, you verify the kill before you get close. And I was very much alive. The red recording light on my phone screen was the only thing steady in the shaking darkness of the utility room. I knelt beside my son, ignoring the damp chill of the concrete seeping through my jeans. The smell of bleach and sickness was thick enough to taste, but I forced myself to focus. I needed this to be airtight. I needed a jury to feel the cold concrete and smell the fear. "Trayvon, look at the lens," I whispered, urgency making my voice harsh. "Tell me exactly what she said. Tell me what the deal is." Trayvon lifted his head. His face was a map of agony, his skin gray and clammy. He looked into the camera eye, his pupils dilated from pain and whatever poison they had pumped into him. "She wants the deed, Dad," he rasped, his voice cracking. "She wants me to sign over the house and the liquid assets. She said if I do not sign tonight, she will stop the antibiotics. She said she will let the infection take the leg." I moved the phone slowly, panning down his body. I documented the bruises on his ribs, the chafing on his wrists where they must have tied him before the chain. Then I focused on the leg. The camera captured the angry purple swelling, the unnatural twist of the shin bone beneath the skin. It was a gruesome sight, a testament to the savagery hiding behind their smiles upstairs. I moved to the chain, filming the heavy padlock and the way it bit into his raw ankle. But Dad Trayvon grabbed my wrist, his hand burning with fever. His eyes were wide with a sudden, desperate realization. "She does not know. She thinks the house is in my name. She thinks the deed is in the safe upstairs." "What do you mean?" I asked, keeping the camera rolling. "The trust," he whispered. "When you bought this land for me 5 years ago, you put it in the Mercer Trust. You said it was for asset protection. I never changed it. I never told her. She is torturing me for a signature that is worthless. She cannot take the house because I do not own it. You do." The words hit me like a physical blow. The irony was so sharp it almost made me laugh. Kylie and her family were committing kidnapping and torture, risking life in prison to steal a property that legally belonged to the old man they were trying to poison upstairs. They were breaking my son to steal a shell. It made my rage burn colder, more precise. They were not just cruel, they were incompetent. I zoomed in on Trayvon's face one last time, capturing the tears mixing with the grime on his cheeks. "I am coming back for you, son," I promised, cutting the recording. "Hold on, just a little longer." Suddenly the floorboards above us groaned. The music upstairs had stopped. In the silence I heard heavy footsteps stomping across the kitchen tile directly over our heads. It was not the light click of heels. It was the heavy, aggressive thud of a large man. "Where is the old man?" Buck's voice boomed, muffled but clear through the floor. "He has been in the bathroom for 20 minutes. Go check the mudroom, Kylie." I froze. My time had run out. They were looking for me. I heard the mudroom door rattle upstairs, then a string of curses. "It is locked," Kylie yelled. "He locked it from the inside." "Break it down," Buck roared. "He is up to something. Get my bat." I looked at Trayvon. Terror washed over his face, erasing the small spark of hope I had just given him. "Hide, Dad," he hissed, pushing at my arm weakly. "They are coming." I scrambled up from my knees. The storage cabinet was too obvious now. If they were searching, they would check there first. I looked around the cramped utility room frantically. In the far corner behind the massive furnace unit, there was a narrow gap where the ductwork met the wall. It was tight, filled with cobwebs and dust, but it was dark. I squeezed myself into the space, pressing my back against the vibrating metal of the furnace. I pulled my coat tight around me, trying to become part of the shadows. I gripped my gun with sweaty palms. The door at the top of the stairs crashed open. Splinters of wood flew. Heavy boots thundered down the wooden steps. "Where are you, old man?" Buck shouted. He burst into the utility room. Through the gap in the ductwork I could see him. He was red-faced, sweating, his tuxedo shirt unbuttoned, exposing a hairy chest. He was holding an aluminum baseball bat, gripping it so tight his knuckles were white. He looked like a mad bull searching for something to gore. He swung the bat, smashing it against the metal water heater. The sound was deafening, a clang that rang in my ears like a gunshot. Trayvon screamed, curling into a ball to protect his head. "Shut up, junkie," Buck spat, kicking Trayvon in the ribs. "Where is your father? I know he came down here." Trayvon wheezed, coughing up blood. "I do not know," he gasped. "He did not come here. Nobody came here." Liar. Buck swung the bat again, shattering a row of glass jars on the shelf above Trayvon's head. Shards of glass rained down on my son. We poured him a drink. "We know he didn't drink it. The fern is dead upstairs, Silas. You think you are smart. Come out and take your medicine." Buck began to tear the room apart. He overturned boxes, threw paint cans across the room. He yanked open the storage cabinet where I had hidden before. It was empty. He cursed loudly, swinging the bat into the metal door, denting it. I held my breath. He was 3 feet away from me. I could smell the whiskey on him. I could see the sweat dripping from his nose. If he looked behind the furnace, it was over. I would have to shoot him. And if I shot him, the rest of them would swarm down here. Buck stopped panting. He looked around the room, his eyes wild. He looked right at the furnace. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird, but the shadows were deep. He blinked, wiped sweat from his eyes, and turned back to Trayvon. "If he is not down here, he must have gone out the garage," Buck muttered. He leaned down, getting right in Trayvon's face. "If you are lying to me, boy, I will break your other leg, and then I will start on your fingers." He turned and marched toward the door that led to the garage. This was my only chance. The moment he stepped through that door, his back would be to me. The stairs were blocked, but the garage had an exterior door. Buck pushed the garage door open and stepped out into the dark bay. The moment the door clicked shut behind him, I moved. I scrambled out from behind the furnace. "I love you, son," I whispered to Trayvon. I did not wait for an answer. I ran to the garage door. I cracked it open an inch. Buck was standing in the middle of the garage, looking around, shining a flashlight into the corners. He was moving toward my truck, which was parked down the street, but he was checking the other cars first. His back was to me. I slipped out, closing the door silently. I stayed low, crouching behind Trayvon's SUV. I moved like a shadow, using the vehicles as cover. I reached the side service door of the garage. It was still unlocked from when I entered. I slipped outside into the snow. The cold air burned my lungs. I did not look back. I ran. I ran with the speed of a man half my age, fueled by adrenaline and hate. I reached my truck, parked under the oak trees. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped the keys. I jammed the key into the ignition and turned it. The old Ford engine roared to life, a loud rumble that shattered the silent night. The garage door flew open. Buck ran out onto the driveway. He saw my truck. He saw the taillights flaring red in the snow. "Hey," he screamed. "Stop!" He raised the bat, but then he dropped it. He reached into his waistband and pulled out a pistol. It was not a hunting rifle. It was a handgun. He leveled it at me. I slammed the truck into drive and floored it. The tires spun on the ice, then caught traction. The truck fishtailed and shot forward. Bang! A gunshot cracked through the air. I heard the bullet whiz past the cab, burying itself in a tree trunk somewhere ahead. He had missed, but he had fired. He had tried to kill me. I did not slow down. I sped down the street, the snow flying in my wake. I checked the rearview mirror. Buck was standing in the middle of the road, watching me go, his gun hanging at his side. He looked small. He looked defeated. But I knew better. He was just getting started. And so was I. I watched the rearview mirror as 2 blinding beams of lead light cut through the swirling snow. It was Trayvon's black Range Rover tearing down the icy road like a missile. Buck was behind the wheel. He wasn't giving up. He was fueled by whiskey and the desperate knowledge that if I got away, his life was over. He gunned the engine, closing the distance between his luxury bumper and the rusted tailgate of my Ford. He was trying to ram me off the road, to bury me and the evidence in a snowbank before I could reach civilization. I gripped the steering wheel, my leather gloves creaking. I knew every inch of this asphalt. I had poured the foundation for this road 20 years ago. I knew where the crown dipped and where the black ice pooled in the shadows of the pines. Buck was a city hustler used to stop and go traffic and dry pavement. He thought the four-wheel drive and the traction control of a $100,000 SUV made him invincible. He was wrong. Physics does not care about your bank account. He surged forward, trying to clip my rear quarter panel to spin me out. I waited until he was inches away until I could see the rage contorting his face in the mirror. Then I tapped the brakes just enough to flash the lights without losing speed. Buck flinched. He jerked the wheel to the left, instinctively trying to avoid a collision. It was a rookie mistake. His tires hit a patch of glazed ice on the center line. The heavy SUV lost traction instantly. It didn't spin. It just slid sideways, carrying all its momentum like a sled. I watched as the Rover glided gracefully off the shoulder. It smashed through a wooden guardrail, splintering the posts like toothpicks, and nose-dived into the deep drainage ditch that ran parallel to the woods. A plume of white powder exploded into the air, burying the hood. The headlights pointed uselessly at the sky. I didn't tap the brakes. I didn't look back. I just shifted into high gear and disappeared into the whiteout. Once I was clear of the immediate danger, I pulled my burner phone from the hidden compartment under the dash. This wasn't the phone I used to text Trayvon. This was a satellite encrypted line I used for business that required absolute discretion. I dialed a number I knew by heart. It rang once. "Stone here," a voice answered, crisp and alert despite the hour. "It is Silas," I said, my voice flat. "Activate Clause 4. There was a pause on the line, a heavy silence that spoke volumes. Clause 4 was the nuclear option. It was a legal protocol we had established a decade ago, designed for a worst-case scenario where local law enforcement was compromised or hostile. It authorized the immediate aggressive intervention of private security to protect asset integrity under the umbrella of federal property laws, Silas Stone said carefully. Clause 4 is an act of war. It bypasses the county sheriff completely. It brings in federal oversight. If you do this, there is no going back. You will be declaring open hostility against the local jurisdiction. The sheriff is compromised. I cut him off. My son is being tortured in his own basement. They are poisoning him. I have biological evidence and video proof. If I call 911, the dispatch will tip off the sheriff, and the sheriff will tip off his niece before a squad car even rolls. By the time they get there, Trayvon will be dead, and I will be the one in handcuffs. I need a federal writ of entry, and I need it 10 minutes ago." "I understand," Stone said, his tone shifting from advisor to shark. "I will wake up Judge Holloway. He owes us. I will frame this as an emergency preservation of assets for the Mercer Trust. Since the property is technically owned by a multi-state corporation, we can argue federal jurisdiction. I will get the writ electronically signed and sent to your secure server." "Do it," I said. "And Stone, I am not going in alone. I am calling Mike." I hung up before he could object. I dialed the second number. Big Mike answered on the first ring. Mike was a former Navy SEAL who ran my private security detail. He was the only man I trusted to watch my back when the contracts got dirty. "Merry Christmas, boss." Mike rumbled. "You calling to wish me tidings of comfort and joy?" "I am calling to cancel Christmas," I said. "Assemble Alpha Team. Full tactical gear. Non-lethal primary, but carry live rounds for backup. We are hitting a residential target in Grosse Pointe. Hostile extraction." Mike's voice dropped an octave, losing all trace of humor. "Who is the target?" "My in-laws," I said. "They have Trayvon. He is chained up. They are armed and they are desperate. I need the breaching kit. I need the thermal drones. And Mike, bring the excavator." "The excavator?" Mike asked. "You want to dig a hole?" "No," I said, cold rage flowing through my veins. "I want to open a door. We are going to tear the house down if we have to. Meet me at the construction yard in 15 minutes. I drove the truck into the sprawling lot of Mercer Construction. The sign out front was modest, just a faded logo on a chain-link fence, but inside it was a fortress of industry. Rows of bulldozers, cranes, and dump trucks sat silent under the snow like sleeping giants. This was the source of my power. This was the empire I had built with sweat and blood while people like Buck and Kylie were playing dress-up. I parked my truck inside the main warehouse and walked into my private office. I locked the door and turned on the lights. I walked to the full-length mirror in the corner. I looked at the old man staring back at me, the hunched shoulders, the stained flannel shirt, the look of defeat. I hated him. I hated that I had worn that skin for so long to protect my son, only to have it almost kill him. I stripped off the coat and threw it on the floor. I unbuttoned the flannel shirt and tossed it into the trash. I kicked off the muddy work boots. I stood there in my undershirt, the scars on my arms and chest, mapping a life of violence and hard labor. I opened the gun safe behind my desk. I took out a Kevlar vest and strapped it on, pulling the Velcro tight across my chest. It felt like a hug from an old friend. I put on a black thermal tactical shirt and heavy canvas combat pants. I laced up a pair of steel-toed tactical boots. I holstered the Colt 1911 at my hip and slid a backup piece, a compact 9mm, into an ankle holster. Finally, I put on a black leather jacket, the leather thick and worn. I looked in the mirror again. The old man was gone. In his place stood Silas Mercer, the man who owned 40% of the infrastructure contracts in the state of Michigan. The man who could shut down the highway system with a single phone call. The man who had buried competition not with lawsuits, but with asphalt. My phone buzzed. It was Stone. "Judge signed the writ," he said. "You have federal authority to enter and secure the property. But Silas, be careful. The law is on your side, but a bullet does not care about a court order." I hung up and walked out into the warehouse bay. The bay doors were rolling up, letting in the swirling snow. Big Mike was there with 4 other men. They looked like mountains carved out of granite, dressed in black tactical gear, carrying duffel bags of heavy equipment. Behind them, idling with a low diesel growl, was a massive yellow excavator, its steel bucket resting on the concrete like a fist. Mike looked at me and nodded. He didn't ask questions. He saw the look in my eyes, and he knew. This wasn't a rescue mission anymore. It was a demolition. "Let's go," I said, my voice echoing in the vast space. "We have a party to crash." The convoy moved down the dark suburban street like a funeral procession of iron and steel. My black truck led the way, followed by 3 armored vans painted with the generic markings of a municipal utility company. Behind them, looming like a prehistoric beast in the snowstorm, rolled the yellow excavator on a flatbed trailer. We killed the headlights as we approached the block, letting the darkness swallow us. The party at my son's house was still raging, a beacon of golden light and ignorance spilling out onto the snow. They were celebrating their victory, dancing on the grave of my family, while my son rotted in the basement. They had no idea that the ground beneath them was about to shift. We pulled up to the curb, forming a barricade that blocked the driveway and the street. I picked up the radio. "Execute Phase 1, I said. Big Mike's voice crackled back. "Copy that, boss. Light them up." Simultaneously, 6 high-intensity floodlights mounted on the vans roared to life. The beams cut through the falling snow like lasers, converging on the front of the house. The windows of the living room exploded with blinding white light. I saw silhouettes inside freeze. The music died instantly. The party was over. Mike stepped out of the lead van wearing a heavy yellow hazmat suit and a hard hat. He held a megaphone to his lips. His voice, amplified to a thunderous boom, rolled over the neighborhood, shaking the icicles from the trees. "This is Emergency Utility Services. We have detected a critical methane gas rupture in the main line directly beneath this foundation. The structure is compromised. I repeat, the structure is compromised. Immediate evacuation is mandatory. You have 2 minutes to exit the premises before we initiate containment protocols." It was a beautiful lie. Methane leaks were invisible, odorless, and terrifying. It triggered a primal panic that overrode logic. Inside the house, chaos erupted. I watched through the windshield as the front door flew open. Guests in tuxedos and evening gowns spilled out into the snow, slipping and screaming, shielding their eyes from the blinding glare of our lights. They didn't care about their coats or their purses. They just wanted to get away from the bomb they thought was ticking beneath their feet. I sat in my truck watching the rats flee the sinking ship. But the rats I wanted were not running. Kylie, Buck, and Misty were still inside. I knew exactly what they were thinking. They could not evacuate. If they left the house, the utility workers would enter to fix the leak. They would go into the basement. They would find the chain, the broken leg, the torture chamber. They were trapped by their own crime. Inside the house, the panic was a living thing. Through the thermal feed on the tablet mounted to my dash, which was linked to the drone hovering silently above the roof, I could see the heat signatures of 3 people clustered in the kitchen near the basement door. They were pacing frantically. "I need to call Uncle Ray." Kylie screamed, her voice faint but audible through the directional microphone Mike had pointed at the window. "He has to stop this. Tell them it is a mistake." She pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling so hard she almost dropped it. I watched the screen of my own satellite phone, waiting for the confirmation from Stone. It chimed a second later. A text message. "Sheriff neutralized. Federal injunction served. He is not picking up. Kylie put the phone to her ear. I could see her face in the window illuminated by the floodlights. She looked like a cornered animal. She shouted into the phone, pick up, damn it. Ray, answer me." She pulled the phone away, staring at it in disbelief. She tried again and again. Nothing. The silence from her protector was louder than the megaphone outside. Her safety net had been cut. Stone had done his job. The local law enforcement had been informed that this was a federal asset recovery operation involving hazardous materials. The sheriff knew that if he intervened, he would be obstructing a federal investigation. He was corrupt, but he wasn't suicidal. He was staying home. "We have to move him," Misty shrieked, grabbing Kylie's arm. "We have to take him out the back." "We cannot," Kylie yelled back, pushing her mother away. "Look at the lights, Mom. They have the whole house surrounded. If we drag a crippled man out the back door, they will see us. We are trapped." "Then we leave him," Buck roared. "We leave him chained up. We tell them he is crazy, that he did it to himself." "They won't believe us," Kylie sobbed. "Not with the leg, not with the infection. If they find him like that, we go to jail for life." The psychological pressure was crushing them. The gas leak ruse forced them to make a choice between their lives and their secrets. They believed the house might explode any second. Every instinct screamed at them to run, but their greed rooted them to the spot. They were paralyzed. "It is time," I said into the radio. "Mike, bring the hammer." Mike signaled the driver of the excavator. The machine groaned its diesel engine, revving up to a roar. The flatbed ramp lowered, and the excavator crawled down onto the asphalt, its steel tracks chewing up the road. It turned toward the house, raising its hydraulic arm. The bucket gleamed under the floodlights like the fist of an angry god. The sight of the heavy machinery moving toward their front lawn broke Buck. The alcohol and the fear boiled over into a toxic rage. He wasn't going to let some utility workers take his castle. He grabbed his shotgun from the umbrella stand by the door. "I am not losing this house," he bellowed. He kicked the front door open and stepped out onto the porch. He looked wild, his tuxedo shirt torn, his eyes bloodshot. He raised the shotgun, leveling it at Mike, who was standing by the lead van. "Get back!" Buck screamed. "Get off my property. There is no gas leak. You are trespassing. I will shoot the first man who takes another step." It was a fatal error. He was threatening a federal contractor in a hazmat suit. He had just escalated the situation from a utility emergency to an armed standoff, and my men were not utility workers. "Drop the weapon," Mike said, his voice calm, amplified by the megaphone. "Drop it now. Make me." Buck spat, cocking the shotgun. Mike didn't flinch. He didn't even reach for a weapon. He just nodded to the man standing in the shadows to Buck's right. It was a shadow Buck hadn't seen. One of Mike's team members who had flanked the porch while the lights dazzled the front. The man moved with a blur of speed. He vaulted over the porch railing, landing silently behind Buck. Before Buck could turn, the man grabbed the barrel of the shotgun with one hand and Buck's wrist with the other. There was a sickening snap. The sound of bone breaking was loud and dry, like a dead branch stepping on in winter. Buck screamed, dropping the gun as his arm bent at an impossible angle. The operative swept Buck's legs out from under him, slamming him face first onto the frozen porch. He zip-tied Buck's hands behind his back in one fluid motion. It took less than 3 seconds. The tough guy, the abuser, the man who broke my son's leg with a bat, was neutralized like a child. "Clear," Mike shouted. I opened the door of my truck. I stepped out into the snow. I didn't button my coat. I wanted them to see the Kevlar. I wanted them to see the badge Stone had arranged for me, a temporary federal asset recovery agent credential clipped to my belt. I walked up the driveway, my boots crunching on the ice. The excavator stopped its bucket, hovering just inches from the front door. I walked up the steps past Buck, who was moaning into the wood, his face pressed against the slush. I didn't look down at him. He was beneath my notice now. I stopped at the open door. The heat from inside spilled out, carrying the smell of the turkey and the fear. Kylie was standing in the foyer. She was trembling, her hands covering her mouth. Misty was cowering behind her, clutching the fur coat. When Kylie saw me, her eyes went wide. She expected a fireman. She expected a cop. She didn't expect the old man she had tried to poison. "Silas," she whispered, her voice trembling. You are supposed to be dead." I finished the sentence for her. My voice was low and cold, a granite slab sliding into place. I stepped across the threshold. I wasn't hunched over anymore. I stood at my full height, filling the doorway. The flannel shirt was gone. The leather jacket creaked as I moved my hand resting on the grip of my 1911. I looked at her, and for the first time, she saw me. Not the father-in-law she mocked, not the victim she targeted. She saw the man who had poured the concrete for the prison she was about to rot in. "Get out of my way," I said. She didn't move. She couldn't. She was frozen by the sheer impossibility of my existence. I walked past her, bumping her shoulder hard enough to send her stumbling back against the wall. I didn't stop. I walked straight toward the mudroom door. I was done playing games. I was done with ruses. I was going to get my son, and God help anyone who tried to stop me. I could hear the sirens in the distance now, federal units approaching to clean up the mess. But the first piece of justice was mine to serve. I kicked the basement door open, the wood splintering around the lock. The darkness of the stairs beckoned. I turned on the flashlight mounted to my pistol and descended into the abyss to bring my boy home. I walked past Kylie like she was a ghost in her own hallway. Her hands clawed at the back of my leather jacket, but I did not break stride. She was screaming something about trespassing and rights, but her voice was just white noise against the thumping of my heart. I had one mission: get to the basement, get to my son. I hit the stairs, taking them two at a time. The flashlight beam from my pistol cut through the gloom. The smell of the utility room rose up to meet me, a toxic cocktail of bleach waste and fear. I kicked the door open so hard it bounced off the concrete wall with a clang that sounded like a bell tolling for the dead. Traven was exactly where I had left him, curled in the filth. His eyes were closed, his breathing shallow and rattling in his chest. He looked small. My boy, who used to lift beams on my job sites, looked like a broken doll. I holstered my weapon and pulled the heavy bolt cutters from the loop on my tactical belt. I knelt in the dirt. "I am here, son," I said, my voice rough. "I told you I was coming back." Traven's eyes fluttered open. He looked at me, but the recognition took a second to land. "Dad," he wheezed, "is it over?" "It is over," I promised. I jammed the jaws of the cutters around the steel link closest to his ankle. I put my weight into it. The muscles in my shoulders burned. The steel groaned, protesting the force. Then with a sharp metallic snap, the link sheared. The chain fell away, rattling onto the concrete floor. "You are free," I said. Boots thundered on the stairs behind me. It wasn't Kylie. It was the medical team Mike had brought in. Two men in tactical medic gear pushed past me carrying a trauma bag and a collapsible stretcher. They moved with the efficiency of soldiers. "BP is dropping 1, medic shouted, checking Trayvon's pulse. "We need to stabilize the leg and move him now. Infection is septic." I stepped back, giving them room. I watched them work, cutting away his soiled pants, putting an IV line into his arm, securing the splint. It broke my heart to see him like that, but it also fueled the fire in my gut. He was alive. He was going to make it. And the people who did this were going to pay in blood and money. "We are moving out," the lead medic barked. They lifted the stretcher. I followed them up the stairs, my hand resting on my gun. We emerged into the kitchen. The bright lights were jarring after the darkness of the pit. The party guests were gone, fled into the night, but the sharks were still circling. Kylie was standing in the center of the kitchen, blocking the path to the front door. She looked deranged. Her hair was wild, her mascara running in black streaks down her face. She was holding a piece of paper in her hand, waving it like a flag. "Stop," she screamed. "You cannot take him. He is my husband. I have rights." The medics paused, looking at me. "Move," I growled. She didn't move. She stepped forward, thrusting the paper at me. It was a crumpled napkin stained with something brown. Scrawled on it in shaky handwriting that I barely recognized as my son's was a signature. "He signed it," she yelled, her eyes wide and manic. "He signed it 10 minutes ago. I woke him up and he signed it. This house is mine. His assets are mine. You are kidnapping him. You are trespassing on my property. Get out of my house." It was pathetic. It was the desperate last stand of a gambler who had bet everything on a losing hand. She actually believed that a signature coerced by torture on a dirty napkin would stand up in court. She believed she had won. I looked at the paper, then at her. "You think that scrap of paper makes you the owner?" I asked, my voice quiet. "It is a legal transfer," she spat. "He gave it to me. He wants me to have it." The front door opened. A blast of freezing air swirled through the foyer, carrying snowflakes into the warm house. A man stepped in. He was wearing a wool coat over an expensive suit, carrying a leather briefcase. It was Stone, my lawyer. He looked around the scene, taking in the broken door, the mud on the marble, the zip-tied father-in-law on the porch, and the hysterical woman in the kitchen. He didn't blink. He walked straight to the kitchen island and set his briefcase down. Mrs. Mercer Stone said, his voice calm and bored. "I am Arthur Stone, legal counsel for the Mercer Trust." Kylie spun around. "Who are you?" she demanded. "Get out." Stone ignored her. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick file bound in blue legal paper. He dropped it onto the counter with a heavy thud. "The document you are holding is worthless," he said without looking at her. "Even if it were notarized, which it is not. Even if it were not obtained under duress, which it clearly was, it would still be worthless." Why, she shrieked. "It is his house." He signed it over. "No," Stone said, adjusting his glasses. "It is not his house. Trayvon Mercer does not own this property. He does not own the cars in the driveway. He does not own the accounts you have been trying to access." Kylie froze. Her hand holding the napkin trembled. "What are you talking about?" "This property." Stone tapped the file, "is owned by the Mercer Family Irrevocable Trust. The beneficiary of the trust is Silas Mercer. Trayvon Mercer is merely a tenant with a revocable lease. The vehicles are leased by Mercer Construction. The bank accounts are sub-accounts of the parent holding company." Stone looked up at her, a thin smile touching his lips. "Basically, Mrs. Mercer, you have spent the last 3 days torturing a man for a set of keys he does not possess. You broke his leg to steal a rental." The color drained from Kylie's face. She looked at the napkin in her hand, then at Trayvon on the stretcher, then at me. The realization hit her like a physical blow. The greed that had driven her, the ambition that had turned her into a monster, it was all for nothing. She had destroyed her life for a mirage. "No," she whispered. "That is a lie." "He said it was his. He said he was rich. He is rich," I said, stepping forward. "He is rich because I built a fortress around his money to protect it from parasites like you. He tried to tell you. Down in the basement, he tried to tell you the deed wasn't his. But you didn't listen. You were too busy playing God." I snatched the napkin from her hand. I crumpled it into a ball and tossed it onto the floor next to her muddy shoes. "Paper trash," I said. "Just like you." The medics started moving again, wheeling Trayvon toward the door. Kylie watched them go, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. She looked around the kitchen as if searching for an exit, for a way to spin this. But there was no spin. The walls were closing in. "Where are you taking him?" she asked, her voice small. "To a private facility," I said, "where you will never see him again." "You cannot do this," she said, tears starting to well up in her eyes. Not tears of sorrow, but tears of self-pity. "I am his wife. I have rights. I am a victim here. You broke into my home. You attacked my father. I will sue you. I will tell the press." I stopped at the door. I turned back to look at her one last time. She was standing in the wreckage of her own making, shivering in her red silk dress. "You want to play the victim?" I asked, walking back until I was right in her face. I leaned in close. I could smell the fear on her now, overpowering the expensive perfume. "You liked the spotlight, Kylie. You liked holding court at the party. You liked being the center of attention." She stared at me, terrified. "Well, get ready," I whispered. "Because the show is just starting. I am not just taking my son. I am taking the narrative. By tomorrow morning, everyone in this city will know exactly what you did. They will know about the chain. They will know about the drugs. They will know about the oatmeal on the floor. You won't be the grieving wife. You will be the monster on the evening news." I pulled back, looking her up and down with disgust. "And do not worry about suing me. You won't have a lawyer. You won't have a dime. Because I am freezing every asset connected to this address. The heat, the water, the electricity. It all gets cut off in 1 hour." I turned and walked away. "But it is freezing," she screamed after me. "You cannot leave us here with no heat." "It is Christmas." "Merry Christmas," I said over my shoulder. I walked out the front door. The wind was howling now, driving the snow into the foyer. I did not close the door. I left it wide open. The storm swirled into the grand entryway, coating the marble floors in white. I walked past Buck, who was still moaning on the porch, guarded by one of Mike's men. "Load him up, Mike," I said, pointing to Buck. "The feds can pick him up at the hospital." He tripped. Mike grinned. "Copy that, clumsy guy." I climbed into the back of the ambulance where they had loaded Trayvon. I sat beside him, holding his hand as the vehicle pulled away. Through the back window, I watched the house. It was dark now, except for the emergency lights of the convoy. The front door gaped open like a wound. Inside, Kylie was alone with the cold, the darkness, and the absolute ruin of her life. She had wanted everything. She was left with nothing but the winter wind. The sterile air of St. Jude's Medical Center smelled of antiseptic and floor wax. I sat in a leather armchair in the corner of the private VIP suite I had secured for Trayvon. My son was sleeping, finally sedated by doctors who actually cared about his well-being. His leg was elevated, encased in a fresh white cast that looked stark against his dark skin. The IV drip was a steady rhythm counting out the seconds of his recovery. Big Mike was posted outside the door, a silent sentinel in tactical gear. No one was getting in without my permission. Not the police, not the press, and certainly not his wife. But Kylie was already in the building. I didn't need to look out the window to know she was there. I just had to look at my phone. I opened the social media app Stone had told me to monitor. There she was, live streaming from the hospital lobby 3 floors down. She was sitting on a bench, bathed in the harsh fluorescent light, her makeup artfully smeared to suggest hours of weeping. She held the phone with a shaky hand, the camera angled down to make her look small and vulnerable. The viewer count was climbing by the second, hitting 5,000, then 6. Guys, she sobbed into the camera, wiping a dry tear from her cheek. I do not know what to do. My father-in-law, he is sick in the head. He broke into our home. He beat up my dad. And now he has kidnapped Trayvon. He dragged him out of bed where he was resting. He took him somewhere, and the doctors won't let me see him. They say I am a threat. Me, his wife. I watched her performance with a cold detachment. She was good. I had to give her that. She knew exactly which buttons to push. The comments were scrolling up the side of the screen, a waterfall of misplaced outrage. Call the cops, honey. That old man needs to be in jail. We are praying for you, Kylie. Do not let him get away with it. She was painting a masterpiece of lies. She was the devoted wife fighting a tyrannical patriarch. She described my truck as a getaway vehicle. She described Mike's team as armed thugs. She conveniently left out the chain, the starvation, and the drugs. I felt a flash of anger heat my neck, but I pushed it down. It would be so easy to type a comment, to post the picture of Trayvon's leg, to scream the truth into the digital void. But that is what she wanted. She wanted a fight. She wanted engagement. She wanted to drag me into the mud where she lived. I put the phone down on the side table face up so I could still hear her voice. I did not engage. I did not argue. I let her have her moment. Let her build her tower of cards as high as she wanted. The higher it went, the harder it would fall when I pulled the table out from under it. I looked at Trayvon. He stirred in his sleep, moaning softly. The drugs she had pumped into him were leaving his system, but the withdrawal was going to be brutal. He was safe now. That was the only thing that mattered. But safety costs money, and Kylie was about to find out exactly who paid the bills in the Mercer family. I picked up my secure satellite phone. It was time to go to work. My first call was to the private banking division of Chase. It was 3 in the morning, but when you hold the kind of accounts I do, you get a 24-hour concierge. Mr. Mercer, the banker, answered on the first ring, his voice professional and alert. How can we assist you tonight? I need a full freeze on the family operating accounts, I said, keeping my voice low so I wouldn't wake my son. Specifically the sub-accounts linked to Trayvon Mercer and Kylie Mercer. Flag them for suspected fraudulent activity. I want every card, every checkbook, every digital transfer blocked effective immediately. Done, sir, the banker said. The keys were clicking in the background. Anything else? Yes, I said. The Platinum Amex and the Black Card issued to Kylie Mercer as an authorized user. Cancel them. Report them stolen. Stolen, sir. The banker hesitated. You heard me, I said. She is in possession of cards that do not belong to her. Cut them off. Understood. Cards are deactivated. I hung up. That was the easy part. Now for the insurance. Trayvon's medical care in this private suite was costing $5,000 a night. The surgery for his leg would be another $50,000. Kylie thought she was covered under Trayvon's executive policy, a premium plan I paid for through the construction company. She thought she had a safety net. I dialed the number for the risk management officer at the insurance firm. He was a friend from the old days, a man who knew how to bury bodies, legally speaking. Frank, it is Silas. Silas. I heard about the trouble, the officer said. Is the boy okay? He is alive, I said. But we have a situation with the policy. The joint health coverage for Trayvon and his spouse. I want to invoke the morality clause. The morality clause was a nasty piece of fine print usually reserved for executives who embezzled money or committed felonies that embarrassed the company. It allowed the policyholder to terminate coverage for a beneficiary instantly without a grace period. On what grounds? Frank asked. Attempted murder, I said flatly. The beneficiary tried to kill the primary insured. I have the police report number and the federal writ. Jesus, Frank breathed. Okay, Silas. If you send me the writ, I can suspension her coverage pending investigation. That means she is cash pay for everything starting now, including any prescriptions or ER visits she tries to make tonight. Do it, I said. And Frank checked the life insurance policies. She probably tried to up the payout on Trayvon. I will look into it. Consider her coverage dead. I ended the call. I looked at the screen of the other phone where Kylie was still streaming. She was talking about how she needed donations to hire a lawyer to save her husband. She had already set up a GoFundMe link in her bio. The audacity was breathtaking. But I wasn't done. The final blow had to be physical. It had to be something she could feel. I opened the property management app on my tablet. This was the control center for the Mercer Trust's real estate assets. I scrolled through the list of commercial buildings and warehouses until I found the residential address in Grosse Pointe. The smart home system was fully integrated, allowing remote control of everything from the thermostat to the locks. I tapped on the security tab. The status showed this front door was wide open just as I had left it. The internal temperature had dropped to 40 degrees. The pipes were at risk of freezing. I tapped the button labeled Emergency Lockdown. A warning box popped up. This will seal all exterior doors, engage deadbolts, and disable all current user codes. Only master administrator access will remain. Proceed. I hit yes. I imagined the heavy electronic bolts sliding home in the door frames of that big empty house. I imagined the keypad on the front door going dark, wiping her code from its memory. I imagined the garage doors locking down, the steel pins engaging. Then I went a step further. I accessed the utility controls. I cut the power to the HVAC system remotely, shutting down the furnace I had hidden behind. I turned off the main water valve. I killed the power to the outlets in the master bedroom. The house was now a fortress, a cold, dark tomb. If she tried to go back, she would find herself locked out in the snow. And if she managed to break a window to get in, she would find no heat, no water, and no light. I sat back in the chair watching the stream. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait for her to step into it. On the screen, Kylie wiped her eyes and sniffled. I just need some coffee, she told her audience, her voice trembling. I am going to the cafeteria. I have been here for hours and nobody has offered me anything. The staff is so rude. They must be working for him. She stood up, holding the phone out in front of her like a shield. She walked through the lobby, the camera bouncing with her steps. I watched her approach the coffee counter. It was a 24-hour kiosk that served overpriced lattes and pastries. I will take a large caramel macchiato and a croissant, she ordered, not bothering to look at the barista. She held the phone up, capturing the transaction. I just need to keep my strength up for Trayvon, she told the chat. He needs me to be strong. She reached into her designer purse and pulled out the Platinum Amex card, the one I had just reported stolen. She tapped it against the reader with a practiced, arrogant flick of her wrist. The machine beeped. A harsh, dissonant buzz. Kylie frowned. She tapped it again. Harder this time. Buzz. The barista, a tired young woman, looked at the screen. I am sorry, ma'am, she said. It says declined. Card reported lost or stolen. What? Kylie squawked. That is impossible. Try it again. She shoved the card at the girl. The girl inserted the chip. Buzz. Ma'am, I have to confiscate the card, the barista said, reaching for it. Store policy on stolen cards. You are not taking my card, Kylie screamed, snatching it back. Her face flushed red. The mask was slipping. The grieving wife was being replaced by the entitled brat. She fumbled in her purse and pulled out another card. The black card. The one with the unlimited limit. Use this one, she snapped. And I want a refund for the inconvenience. She tapped the black card. Buzz. Refer to issuer, the barista read from the screen. Kylie staring at the machine. Her mouth opened and closed. The chat on her stream was going wild. Card declined. Thought she was rich. Embarrassing. Is she broke? I do not understand, she stammered. She looked at the phone camera, realizing thousands of people had just watched her financial humiliation. My father-in-law, she hissed. He did this. He hacked my accounts. She was starting to panic. I could see it in her eyes. The fear was real now. Not the fake fear for her husband, but the real fear for herself. Then her phone pinged. A loud notification sound that cut through her rant. She looked down at the screen. I knew exactly what it was. It was the notification from the smart home app. I watched her face as she read it. Alert security protocol, alpha initiated. User Kylie Mercer access revoked. All locks engaged. System offline. She stared at the message. She tapped the screen frantically, trying to log back into the app. Access denied. User does not exist. No, she whispered. No, no, no. She looked up at the camera. Her eyes were wild. He locked me out, she screamed. He locked me out of my own house. My clothes are in there. My jewelry. The chat was turning. Wait, if it is your house, how can he lock you out? Something doesn't add up. Why are your cards declined? Kylie read the comments and the realization hit her. She was losing the narrative. She was losing her money. She was losing her home. And she was doing it live in front of the world. She ended the stream abruptly, the screen going black. I sat back in my chair in the quiet hospital room. I closed the app. I looked at my son, who was breathing steadily, the rise and fall of his chest, the only thing that mattered. You are safe now, Trayvon, I whispered. The monsters are outside, and it is getting very cold. I sat in the darkened hospital room, the blue light of my tablet illuminating my face. Trayvon was asleep, his chest rising and falling in a rhythm that finally seemed peaceful. But there was no peace for the people who had put him here. I swiped open the security app linked to the Grosse Pointe house. The high-definition night vision cameras painted the scene in ghostly shades of green and gray. Kylie's car pulled into the driveway, skidding slightly on the ice. She slammed the door and marched toward the front porch, her mother Misty trailing behind her like a lost puppy. Buck was not with them. The federal agents had picked him up at the hospital entrance just as I had arranged. He was already in custody, likely screaming about his rights in a holding cell. That left the two women alone to face the winter. I watched on the screen as Kylie reached for the front door handle. She punched her code into the keypad. Nothing happened. The red light on the lock blinked once, a silent rejection. She tried again, faster this time, her fingers stabbing at the buttons. The light blinked red again. I could see her mouth moving, screaming into the wind. She kicked the door. She grabbed the handle and rattled it violently. It held firm. The deadbolts I had engaged remotely were solid steel driven deep into the reinforced frame. She was locked out of her castle. She turned and yelled something at her mother. They ran around the side of the house toward the back patio. I switched camera views with a tap of my finger following them. They tried the sliding glass doors. Locked. They tried the kitchen window. Locked. Then they saw the yard. Before Big Mike and his team had left, I had given them one final instruction. They had cleared the house of the parasites' personal belongings, but they hadn't packed them nicely. Scattered across the pristine snow of the backyard lay the wreckage of their vanity. Designer dresses soaked in slush, handbags worth thousands of dollars buried in drifts. Kylie's jewelry box had been dumped out, spilling diamonds and gold chains into the ice. I watched Kylie fall to her knees. She was frantically digging through the snow, pulling up a ruined Hermes scarf. She screamed a soundless cry that the camera microphone picked up as a distorted burst of static. It was the tantrum of a child who realized the toys had been taken away. Misty grabbed a landscaping rock. I watched her weigh it in her hand. She marched up to the patio door and swung it with all her might against the glass. Thud. The rock bounced off. I chuckled softly in the quiet hospital room. When I built that house for my son, I installed hurricane-proof impact glass on the ground floor. It was designed to withstand a Category 5 storm. A rock thrown by an angry middle-aged woman was not going to scratch it. She hit it again and again until her arm gave out. The glass didn't even crack. They were freezing now. I could see them shivering, their breath coming in white clouds. They were wearing their party clothes, thin fabrics meant for climate-controlled rooms, not the biting Detroit winter. The temperature was dropping toward zero. The house was right there, warm and inviting on the other side of the glass, but it might as well have been on the moon. They retreated to the front driveway, huddled together for warmth. I watched them pull out their phones. They were trying to find a way out, a lifeline. This was the moment of the squeeze. I had already cut the cards, but they didn't know the extent of the blockade yet. I switched apps on my tablet, opening the banking monitor. I could see the real-time transaction attempts. Kylie was trying to book a room at the Ritz-Carlton. Declined. She tried the Marriott. Declined. She tried a budget motel on the highway. Declined. She was frantic now. I could see her pacing in the driveway, tapping furiously at her screen. She opened the Uber app. Payment method invalid. She tried Lyft. Payment method invalid. She turned to her mother. Misty dug into her purse and pulled out a credit card. It was one of the fraudulent ones she had opened in my name. She tried to book a ride. Card reported stolen. Account frozen. They were stranded. They had no cash because people like them never carried cash. They lived on credit and the assumption that the money would always be there. They had phones but no way to pay for a rescue. They couldn't call a friend because they had alienated everyone with their arrogance, or they were too ashamed to admit they were homeless. And they certainly couldn't call the police, not with a federal investigation hanging over their heads and Buck already in cuffs. They stood there in the driveway, two women who thought they owned the world, now realizing they didn't even own the coats on their backs. The cold was biting through their clothes. Their survival instinct kicked in. They looked at the only shelter left. Trevon's Range Rover was parked in the driveway where Buck had left it before he took the other car to chase me. It was a luxury SUV, heated leather seats, climate control, a sanctuary on wheels. I saw them run for it. Kylie yanked the door open. It was unlocked. They scrambled inside, slamming the doors against the wind. I could imagine the relief they felt as they settled into the plush leather. They probably thought they had found a loophole, a way to wait out the night in comfort until they could come up with a new lie in the morning. I waited. I let them get comfortable. I let them start the engine. I saw the headlights flare to life, illuminating the garage door. I saw the exhaust plume from the tailpipe. They were cranking the heat, blasting the seat warmers, charging their phones. They were feeling safe again. I opened the vehicle telematics app. This was the software used by the fleet manager at Mercer Construction. Since the Range Rover was technically a company vehicle leased to the trust, I had full administrative control. I looked at the dashboard on my screen. It showed the engine running, the internal temperature rising, the doors locked. I tapped the tab labeled Anti-Theft Protocols. There was a feature designed for carjackings. It was called Total Immobilization. It was meant to be used if a thief was driving the vehicle away, but it worked just as well if the thieves were sitting in the driveway. I pressed the button. On the security camera feed, the reaction was instant. The Range Rover went berserk. The horn began to blare, a rhythmic, deafening honk that echoed off the neighboring houses. The headlights and taillights flashed in a strobing pattern. Inside the car, the dashboard would be lighting up like a Christmas tree. The engine cut out, instantly killed by the remote command. The heat stopped blowing. The power steering locked. I saw Kylie and Misty jumping in their seats, covering their ears against the noise. Kylie tried to restart the engine. The starter ground uselessly. She tried again and again, panic setting in. The car was dead. It was a brick. But I wasn't done. I hit the secondary lock command. The door locks engaged with a mechanical thud. The child safety locks activated. They were trapped inside a screaming, flashing metal box. The noise was tremendous. In the quiet suburb, it sounded like an air raid siren. Lights flickered on in the houses next door. Neighbors were coming to their windows, peering out at the spectacle. Kylie was pounding on the glass, screaming something I couldn't hear over the horn. She was trying to open the door, but the electronic locks held firm. She was a prisoner in the very symbol of wealth she had tried to steal. Then came the blue lights. A patrol car turned onto the street, silent at first, then chirping its siren to clear the intersection. It wasn't the sheriff. It was the state police responding to the disturbance calls that were undoubtedly flooding 911. Two troopers stepped out of the cruiser. They approached the SUV cautiously, hands on their holsters. The horn was still blaring, masking their approach. They shined their flashlights into the cabin. I saw them trying to communicate with the women inside. They gestured for them to open the door. Kylie was shaking her head, pointing at the lock, indicating she couldn't get out. I decided to be helpful. I tapped the unlock command on my tablet. The doors clicked open. Kylie tumbled out onto the driveway, practically falling into the arms of the trooper. She was hysterical, screaming about being hacked, about me, about the cold. She looked deranged. But then the second trooper shined his light into the back seat. He saw something. He reached in and pulled out a bag. It was the bag Buck had packed for his getaway, the one he had left behind in his haste. It was unzipped. I zoomed in with the camera. Even in the grainy night vision, I could see what was inside. Stacks of cash, prescription pads, and a handgun. The trooper yelled a command. Kylie and Misty froze. They put their hands up, confused and terrified. "Get on the ground," the trooper shouted, drawing his weapon. Kylie screamed. She tried to run back toward the house, toward the shelter that wasn't there. It was a stupid move. The trooper tackled her into a snowbank. He cuffed her while she kicked and wailed. Misty didn't run. She just collapsed, weeping into her hands, sinking into the snow next to her daughter's scattered jewelry. The troopers hauled them up. They dragged them toward the patrol car. Kylie was still fighting, screaming that she was the victim, that she owned this town. But the troopers didn't care who she was. They only saw a hysterical woman in a stolen car with a bag of cash and a gun creating a public disturbance. They shoved her into the back of the cruiser. Misty followed, head bowed. I watched as the patrol car drove away, the red and blue lights fading into the distance. The driveway was empty now, save for the abandoned Range Rover and the debris of their former lives scattered across the lawn. The silence returned to the street. The show was over. I closed the app on my tablet. I leaned back in the chair and closed my eyes, letting out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 3 days. It was done. The house was sealed. The money was safe. The rats were in cages. I looked over at Trayvon. He was still sleeping. His face relaxed for the first time in weeks. I reached out and adjusted his blanket, tucking it around his shoulders. "We are going to be okay, son," I whispered. But the war wasn't over. There was still one battle left to fight. The courtroom. They would try to lie their way out of this. They would try to use the system. But they didn't know that I had saved the best ammunition for last. The trial was going to be the final nail in their coffin, and I was going to be the one holding the hammer. The courtroom smelled of lemon polish and old lies. I sat at the defendant's table next to Stone, watching the performance of a lifetime. It had been 7 days since the raid on the house, 7 days since I pulled my son out of hell. But looking at Kylie now, you would think she was the one who had been tortured. She sat on the witness stand looking small and fragile. She was wearing a modest white cardigan and a floral dress that buttoned to her neck. Her hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail and her face was scrubbed clean of makeup. She looked like a Sunday school teacher who had lost her way. She dabbed at her dry eyes with a tissue every few seconds, sniffing loudly into the microphone. Her lawyer, a slick man named Pendergast with a smile like a used car salesman, paced in front of the jury box. He was painting a picture and he was using a very wide brush. "Ladies and gentlemen," he boomed, pointing an accusing finger at me, "this woman is a victim of a drug-addicted husband who lost his mind and a violent father-in-law who thinks he is above the law. Look at this man. He broke into her home. He assaulted her father. He kidnapped her husband at gunpoint." He turned to Kylie, softening his voice. "Tell us, Mrs. Mercer, why was your husband in the basement?" Kylie looked down at her hands, her voice trembling just enough to sound heartbroken. "It was his choice," she whispered. "Trayvon. He has been battling addiction for years, heroin, pills, whatever he could find. He told me he was dangerous when he was high. He begged me to help him detox. He said he needed to be restrained so he wouldn't hurt himself or me." She looked up at the judge, tears finally spilling over. "I didn't want to do it, Your Honor, but I loved him. I wanted him to get better. I brought him food. I cleaned him. I sat with him for hours praying. And then his father broke in. He had a gun. He had a gang of thugs. They destroyed our home. They threw me out into the snow." The courtroom murmured. I saw the judge, a stern white man named Sullivan, looking at me with suspicion. The narrative was working. To them, I was the angry black man who had terrorized a suburban white woman. To them, the idea of a successful architect chaining himself up to get clean sounded plausible because they wanted to believe the worst about addiction. Pendergast smirked at me. "No further questions, Your Honor." Stone stood up. He didn't stride. He didn't boom. He just walked to the podium with the weight of a man carrying a loaded weapon. "Mr. Mercer," Stone said, gesturing to me, "do you have anything to add to the record regarding the events of December 24th? I stood up. I buttoned my suit jacket. I walked to the witness box. I didn't look at the jury. I looked straight at Kylie. She flinched, but she held my gaze, her eyes hard and hateful behind the tears. "I do not have a story to tell," I said, my voice deep and steady, filling the room without shouting. "I do not have tears. I have the truth. And the truth does not need a white cardigan to be believable." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a flash drive. I held it up. "Your Honor, the plaintiff claims she was a loving wife helping a sick husband. She claims she sat with him and prayed. I would like to submit into evidence Exhibit A, A video recording taken on the night in question inside the utility room of the Mercer residence. Pendergast jumped up. Objection. Illegal recording. Violation of privacy. Overruled, Judge Sullivan said, leaning forward. This is a guardianship hearing, Mr. Pendergast. The court needs to determine the fitness of the parties. If there is video of the ward's condition, I want to see it. Stone took the drive and plugged it into the court's AV system. The large screens on the walls flickered to life. The audio crackled. Suddenly, the courtroom was no longer in the municipal building. We were back in the basement. The sound of the party music thumped in the background, and there was Kylie on the screen in her red silk dress holding the bowl of oatmeal. The video was crystal clear. Every pixel was an indictment. Sign the papers, Trevon, the video. Kylie said, her voice dripping with venom. You are pathetic. You are a junkie. The courtroom went silent. Absolute, deathly silence. On the screen, Kylie dipped the spoon and then pulled it away, letting the food splatter on Trayvon's chest. Oops, she giggled on the video. Look at you. You are such a mess. I watched the jury. Their mouths were open. They looked from the screen to the woman in the white cardigan trying to reconcile the monster with the martyr. Then came the kick. On the screen, Kylie's stiletto connected with Trayvon's broken leg. The sound of his scream tore through the courtroom, raw and agonizing. It was the sound of a soul breaking. In the witness box, the real Kylie turned pale. She gripped the railing, her knuckles white. Do us both a favor and just die already, the video, Kylie whispered. The screen went black. For 5 seconds, nobody breathed. Then the room exploded. A woman in the back row gasped loudly. A juror covered her mouth, looking like she was going to be sick. Judge Sullivan's face had gone a dark, furious shade of red. He looked at Kylie with an expression of pure revulsion. Mrs. Mercer, the judge said, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. Is that you on the video? Kylie stammered. It is out of context. It was tough love. He needed... Tough love, the judge roared, slamming his gavel. You kicked a man with a broken leg, you starved him, you laughed at him. Stone stepped forward again. He wasn't done. He held up a thick file. Your Honor, if I may, Stone said. That video establishes the abuse, but it does not explain the cause. The plaintiff claims my client, Trayvon Mercer, is a drug addict. She claims he was in a self-imposed detox. Stone opened the file and pulled out a lab report. We ran a full toxicology panel on Trayvon Mercer upon his admission to St. Jude's. The results are here. He handed the paper to the bailiff, who ran it to the judge. Negative for heroin, Stone read aloud. Negative for cocaine. Negative for methamphetamines. Negative for every recreational drug known to man. Trayvon Mercer is not an addict. He has never been an addict. Then what was in his system, Pendergast asked, trying to salvage the sinking ship. If he wasn't high, why was he slurring his words in the video? Because he was poisoned, Stone said, his voice turning to ice. The toxicology report shows lethal levels of benzodiazepines mixed with a veterinary tranquilizer called xylazine. It is a horse sedative, Your Honor. It causes muscle paralysis, confusion, and necrosis of the tissue. That is why his leg is rotting. It wasn't just the break. It was the poison she was injecting directly into his veins to keep him compliant. The courtroom gasped again. This wasn't guardianship anymore. This was attempted murder. But there is one final piece of evidence, Stone said. And this one speaks to motive. He pulled out a second medical file. It was older, stamped with the logo of a fertility clinic. Kylie Mercer claims she loves her husband, Stone said. She claims they were trying to build a family. But during our investigation into her medical history, we found this. He held up a consent form. 2 years ago, Trayvon Mercer went in for a routine hernia surgery. Kylie Mercer held his medical power of attorney at the time. While he was under anesthesia, she authorized an additional procedure, a chemical sterilization. Kylie stood up in the witness box. Stop it, she screamed. You cannot show that. That is private. Sit down, the judge barked. Stone continued, his voice relentless. She had him sterilized, Your Honor. Without his knowledge. She ensured that he could never produce an heir. Why? Because if Trayvon died without children, she would be the sole beneficiary of his estate. If he had a child, that child would inherit the trust. She wasn't building a family. She was pruning the family tree to make sure she was the only one left standing under the money. I looked at Kylie. She was trembling violently now. Her mask was gone. The white cardigan couldn't hide the rot underneath anymore. She looked like a trapped rat. You monster, I said quietly from my seat. The judge looked at the papers, then at Kylie. He didn't even look at the jury. He didn't need to. This court has seen enough, Judge Sullivan said. He signed a paper on his bench with a furious slash of his pen. The petition for guardianship is denied with prejudice. Furthermore, I am issuing a bench warrant for the immediate arrest of Kylie Mercer for aggravated assault, kidnapping, and attempted murder. Bailiff, take her into custody. No, Kylie shrieked as the bailiff moved toward her. You do not understand. I needed the money. He has so much money. It isn't fair. The bailiff grabbed her arms, pulling them behind her back. The click of the handcuffs was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. Better than the music of any party. It is over, Kylie, I said, standing up. You wanted to be taken care of. Well, the state is going to take care of you for a very long time. She screamed, cursing me, cursing Trayvon as they dragged her out of the courtroom. Her lawyer started packing his briefcase, not even looking at her. He knew a lost cause when he saw one. I looked at Stone. He nodded. We got her, Silas, he said. We got her, I agreed. But we aren't done. I want the mother, I want the father, and I want everyone who ever helped them. I walked out of the courtroom, my head held high. The reporters were waiting in the hall, but I walked past them. I had a son to visit, and I had a promise to keep. The Mercer family was cleaning house, and we were just getting started. The heavy wooden doors of the courtroom banged open, and a squad of deputies marched in. They moved with the synchronized precision of a military unit. The air in the room shifted instantly, from the tension of a trial to the chaos of a raid. Kylie was still standing in the witness box, her hands gripping the railing, her face twisted in a rictus of shock. She looked at the officers, then at me, then at the judge. The realization that her performance had failed finally hit her. She wasn't walking out of here. She was being carried out. Misty was sitting in the front row of the gallery, clutching her purse like a shield. When she saw the deputies heading for her daughter, she stood up to run, but she didn't get far. 2 officers blocked her path. One of them grabbed her arm. Misty Vance, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and fraud, the officer barked. Misty shrieked a high-pitched sound that grated on the ears. No, she yelled, kicking at the deputy's shins. I didn't do anything. It was her idea. She pointed a shaking finger at her own daughter. Kylie made me do it. In the witness box, Kylie snapped. The mask of the grieving, fragile wife didn't just slip, it shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. She lunged over the railing, screaming not at the police, but at me. You did this, she roared, her face contorted with ugly, raw hate. You ruin everything, Silas. You and your stupid son. He was supposed to die. He was supposed to just sign the papers and die. Why couldn't he just die? The courtroom gasped. The jury stared in horror at the woman who had just confessed her darkest desire in a fit of rage. The white cardigan she wore now looked like a costume, a mockery of innocence. Deputies grabbed Kylie, pulling her arms behind her back. She fought them, spitting and clawing like a cornered raccoon. Get your hands off me, she screamed. I am a Mercer. I own this town. You own nothing, I said, my voice cutting through her hysteria. You are a tenant, Kylie, and your lease is up. She locked eyes with me as they dragged her toward the side door. Her eyes were black pits of malice. I will kill you, she spat. I will get out of here and I will burn you down. I watched her go, my face impassive. You will have to get in line, I thought. Stone gathered his papers, his movements calm and methodical amidst the pandemonium. That went well, he said dryly, snapping his briefcase shut. It went exactly as planned, I said, but we are not done. They are in cages now, but snakes have a way of slithering out. We need to make sure there is no rock left for them to hide under. 2 days later, I was sitting in my office at the construction yard. The sun was setting, casting long orange shadows across the rows of heavy machinery. The phone on my desk rang. It was the landline, the number I rarely gave out. The caller ID read County Detention Center. I let it ring 3 times. I knew who it was. I picked up the receiver. You have a collect call from an inmate, Kylie Mercer. Press 1 to accept. I pressed the button. There was a crackle of static and then the sound of heavy breathing. Silas, she whispered. Her voice was trembling weak. It sounded like the girl in the white cardigan again. What do you want, Kylie? I asked, leaning back in my chair. I am scared, Silas, she cried. It is horrible in here. The women, they are animals. They took my shoes. The food is rotten. Please, you have to help me. I stayed silent. I let her hear the hum of the heater in my warm office. Silas, please. She continued, her voice gaining a desperate urgency. I know I said terrible things. I was out of my mind with grief, but you cannot leave me in here. Not now. Why not now, I asked. Because, she paused for dramatic effect. Because I am pregnant. I didn't blink. I didn't gasp. I just stared at the wall where I had pinned the demolition schedule for the next month. Pregnant, I repeated flatly. Yes, she sobbed. I took a test the morning of the party. I was going to tell Trayvon as a Christmas surprise. It is a boy, Silas. I can feel it. It is your grandson. You cannot let your grandson be born in prison. You have to drop the charges. For the baby. It was her final card. Her ace in the hole. She was banking on my weakness. She thought the old man who wanted a family would crumble at the mention of a grandchild. She thought she could use an innocent life as a hostage one last time. But she had forgotten who she was dealing with. She had forgotten that Stone and I had turned over every stone in her life. Are you finished? I asked, my voice devoid of emotion. Silas, please think about the legacy, she begged. The Mercer bloodline. I opened the top drawer of my desk. Inside was a file folder labeled Medical History K. Mercer. Stone had obtained it through a subpoena during the discovery phase for the guardianship hearing. It contained records from a private clinic in Miami, a clinic she had visited 2 years ago during a girls' trip. Kylie, I said, opening the file. Do you remember Dr. Aronson in Miami? The silence on the other end of the line was instantaneous. The sobbing stopped. I have your file right here. I continued reading from the paper. Date of procedure, October 14th, 2021. Patient elected for a partial hysterectomy citing personal preference and aesthetic concerns regarding future pregnancies. I heard a sharp intake of breath on the line. You cut your own womb out, Kylie, I said, my voice hard as steel. You did it because you didn't want to ruin your figure. You did it 2 years ago. So unless this is the second coming of Christ, you are lying to me. Again. No, she stammered. That is fake. You forged that. I do not forge documents, I said. That is your family's specialty. This is real. Just like the sterilization you forced on my son. You ensured there would never be a Mercer heir. You wanted to be the end of the line so you could keep all the money. Silas, listen, she shrieked, her voice losing all pretense of sadness, returning to the shrill anger I knew so well. Goodbye, Kylie, I said. Do not call this number again. I hung up the phone. I sat there for a moment, feeling the weight of her evil. She had tried to use a non-existent child, a child she had physically ensured could never exist, as a bargaining chip. It was a level of depravity that made me want to take a shower. But I had work to do. The head of the snake was cut off, but the body was still thrashing. Buck and Misty lived in a double-wide trailer in a park on the south side of the county. It was a place known for methamphetamine labs and stolen car parts. It was where they had come from, and it was where they had hatched their plans to infiltrate my family. But they weren't the only ones. Kylie had cousins, uncles, an entire clan of leeches who had been benefiting from Trayvon's money for years. They drove trucks Trayvon paid for. They lived in trailers Trayvon paid the rent on. They were all complicit. They had all eaten at the table while my son starved. I picked up a thick stack of papers from my desk. These were not medical records. These were deeds and debt notes. Stone had been busy. While the trial was going on, he had quietly approached the owner of the trailer park. The man was in debt, facing bankruptcy. He was happy to sell the entire park to a holding company for cash. That holding company was me. I also bought the debt. Buck had loans scattered all over town, predatory loans with high interest rates. I bought them all. Every IOU, every marker, every lien. I owned their debt. I owned their land. I owned the ground they walked on. I called Mike. Get the trucks ready, I said. We have an eviction to process. It was snowing again when we rolled into the trailer park. This time it wasn't a stealth mission. It was a statement. My convoy of trucks pulled up to the main gate. I wasn't wearing a disguise. I was wearing my good wool coat and a suit. I looked like the landlord I was. Mike and his team moved out. They went to Buck's trailer first. It was empty, of course, since Buck and Misty were in jail, but her sister lived there now, squatting in the property. Mike banged on the door. Eviction notice, he shouted. You have 10 minutes to vacate. The door opened. A woman who looked like a rougher version of Misty stood there, a cigarette dangling from her lip. You cannot throw us out, she yelled. We have rights. Your lease expired yesterday, I said, stepping forward, and the new owner has decided to repurpose the land. New owner, she sneered. "Who is that?" "Me," I said. Her eyes went wide. She knew who I was. Everyone in the family knew the name Silas Mercer now. "Get your things," I said, "or they go in the dumpster." We moved through the park like a storm. We hit every trailer occupied by a member of the Vance clan. Cousins, nephews, aunts. We served them all. They screamed. They threatened. One of them tried to let a pit bull loose on Mike, but Mike just stared the dog down until it retreated. They stood in the muddy street, clutching their belongings in garbage bags. They looked at me with hatred. "You are ruining us," one of the uncles shouted. "Where are we supposed to go?" "I do not know," I said, looking at them. "Maybe you should have thought about that before you helped spend my son's money. Maybe you should have thought about that while you were driving trucks he paid for while he was chained in a basement." I signaled the bulldozer driver. He revved the engine. The blade lowered. "Tear it down," I said. I watched as the machine drove through the thin walls of Buck's trailer. The aluminum screamed as it crumpled. The structure collapsed in a cloud of dust and insulation. It was satisfying. It was the sound of a tumor being cut out. I turned my back on the destruction. The snow was covering the mud, making everything clean again. I got into my truck and drove away, leaving them in the cold just as they had left my son. The parasites were gone. The debt was collected. The books were balanced. I drove to the rehabilitation center where Trayvon was staying. It was a quiet place by the lake, far away from the noise and the lies. I walked into his room. He was sitting by the window watching the snow fall. He looked thin, but his eyes were clear. The shadows were gone. "Dad," he said, smiling as I entered. I sat down opposite him. I pulled a folder from my briefcase. "It is done," I said. "Kylie is gone. Her parents are gone. The Leaches are gone." Trayvon nodded slowly. "And the house? Sold," I said. "I sold it yesterday to a developer who is going to tear it down and build condos. There will be nothing left of that place, Trayvon. No memories, no ghosts, just dirt." He took a deep breath. "Good. I never want to see it again." I reached across and took his hand. "It is a new start, son. A clean slate. You have your life back. And this time you know who has your back." Trayvon squeezed my hand. His grip was getting stronger every day. "I know, Dad," he said. "I know." We sat there in the silence, watching the snow cover the world in white, waiting for the spring that we knew was finally coming. The snow was falling again 1 year later, but this time it did not look like a shroud covering a crime scene. It looked like a blanket tucking the world in for a long winter sleep. I stood at the window of my cabin, a mug of hot coffee warming my hands. The lake out back was frozen solid, a sheet of white ice stretching to the tree line. It was quiet here. There were no sirens, no screaming in-laws, no thumping bass from a party that was just a cover for torture. There was only the crackle of the wood stove and the smell of bacon frying in the cast-iron skillet. I turned from the window as I heard the rhythmic thud of a cane on the pine floorboards. Trayvon walked into the kitchen. He moved slowly, his gait uneven, but he was moving under his own power. He wasn't the broken skeleton I had pulled out of that basement. He had put on 30 pounds of muscle. His skin was clear. The shadows under his eyes were gone, replaced by a calm that he had never possessed before, even when he was at the height of his success. "Morning, Dad," he said, pulling out a chair at the rough-hewn table. "Morning, son," I said. "How is the leg?" "It is stiff," he admitted, rubbing his thigh. "The cold gets into the metal pins, but it is holding." I set a plate of eggs and bacon in front of him. He ate with an appetite that still made me smile. For the first few months after the hospital, he could barely keep food down. The trauma of starvation had messed with his system. We had spent the last year here in the Upper Peninsula, far away from Detroit, far away from the gossip and the cameras. We healed. I rebuilt the deck while he rebuilt his mind. We fished, we chopped wood, we talked about everything and nothing. "You know," Trayvon said, pointing his fork at the window, "a year ago today I thought I was going to die in a pile of my own filth. I thought that was the end of the story. It was the end of a chapter," I corrected him, pouring myself more coffee. "It was the end of the chapter where you let other people write your life for you." He nodded slowly. He looked around the cabin. It was small. Just 2 bedrooms, a main room, and a kitchen. The furniture was sturdy and handmade, not imported Italian leather. There were no servants, no smart home systems that could lock you out. It was simple, and for the first time in his adult life, Trayvon seemed truly happy. "I missed this," he said. Not just being safe, but this. Living real. I got so caught up in the image dad, the big house, the trophy wife, the country club. I thought that was what success looked like. Success looks like waking up in the morning without owing your soul to anyone, I said. Success is knowing that the floor under your feet is yours and nobody can kick you off it. He pushed his empty plate away. Speaking of owing, he said, his expression turning serious. We need to talk about the accounts. You have been paying for everything this past year. My rehab, the lawyers, this place. I sat down opposite him. I had been waiting for this conversation. You do not owe me anything, Trevon, I said. It is family money, but you are right. We need to talk about the future. I reached under the table and pulled up a heavy leather satchel. I placed it on the table and opened it. Inside were ledgers, blueprints, and legal documents. You asked me once how much I was worth, I said. I never told you because I was afraid it would ruin you. I was afraid you would turn out like them. Like the leeches. I pushed a ledger toward him. But you have been through the fire, I continued. You looked the devil in the face and you survived. You learned the hard way that money attracts wolves, so I think you are ready to know the truth. Trevon opened the ledger. Before I reveal what's really written in that ledger comment, I'm here. If you're still with me at this moment, just so I know you haven't walked away. And one quick note, parts of what comes next are dramatized for storytelling purposes and may not be entirely factual. If you'd rather stop here, feel free to exit the video now. He scanned the columns of numbers. His eyes widened. He turned the page. And the next. Dad, he whispered. It is the Mercer Trust, I said. It is not just cash, Trevon. It is dirt. It is concrete. It is steel. I own the land the new stadium is built on. I own the warehouses down by the river. I own the asphalt plant that paves the highways. He looked up at me, stunned. I thought you just had a good pension and some savings, he said. I built this brick by brick, I said, leaning forward. I kept my head down. I wore my work boots. I let people think I was just a laborer, because when people think you are nothing, they do not see you coming, and they do not try to take what is yours until it is too late. I tapped the ledger with my finger. I am 70 years old, son. I cannot run this empire forever. I need a partner. I need someone who knows how to build, but also knows how to protect. Are you asking me to run the company? He asked. I am asking you to be the CEO, I said. But not the kind of CEO you were before. No more fancy offices, no more gala dinners. You are going to be in the field. You are going to wear boots. You are going to know the name of every foreman and every driver. You are going to learn where the money really comes from. Trevon ran his hand over the leather cover of the book. He looked at his cane, then at me. I can do that, he said. I want to do that. Good, I said. But there are conditions, strict ones. Name them. First, I retain veto power on all major asset liquidations for the next 5 years. Second, you sign a prenuptial agreement for any future relationship that is so watertight it would make the Pope blush. And third, we set up a new charitable arm of the trust. Charity, he asked. For victims of financial abuse, I said, we are going to help people who are trapped like you were. We are going to provide legal funds, emergency housing, and investigators. We are going to be the cavalry for people who think nobody is coming. Trevon smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached his eyes. I like that condition the best, he said. We sat there for a while planning the future. It felt good. It felt solid. It was not a house of cards built on debt and lies. It was a foundation of stone. There is one more thing, I said, standing up. I walked to the mantel over the fireplace. The mail came yesterday while you were napping. There was a letter for you. I picked up a white envelope. It looked cheap and thin. The return address was stamped in red ink. State Correctional Facility for Women. Trevon's face hardened. He didn't reach for it. Who is it from? He asked, though he knew. Kylie, I said. He stared at the envelope in my hand as if it contained anthrax. What does it say? He asked, his voice tight. I opened it. I unfolded the single sheet of lined yellow paper. The handwriting was scratchy, desperate, scrawled with a dull pencil. Dear Trevon, I read aloud. I hope you are okay. I miss you so much. It is so hard in here. I am cold all the time. The other women are mean to me. I have nobody. Mom stopped writing me because she blames me for everything. Dad is in the men's unit and he won't take my calls. I am all alone. I paused, looking at Trevon. He was gripping his cane, his knuckles white. I know you are angry, I continued reading. But we had something special once. Please, can you just send me $50? Just 50. I need to buy ramen and shampoo from the commissary. I am hungry, Trayvon. Please, for old time's sake. Love, Kylie. I lowered the letter. The silence in the cabin was heavy. This was the woman who had lived in a mansion, who had worn diamonds, who had sneered at my $100 bill. Now she was begging for pocket change to buy instant noodles. Trayvon looked at the fire crackling in the stove. He looked at the snow outside. He looked at his leg, which would never be quite the same again. $50, he murmured. She starved me for 3 days, Dad. She would have killed me for a signature, and she wants $50 for shampoo. He reached out his hand. Give it to me, he said. I handed him the letter. He didn't read it. He didn't look at the handwriting that used to sign his birthday cards. He crumpled it into a tight ball. He stood up, leaning on his cane, and walked to the wood stove. He opened the iron door. The heat flared out orange and intense. For old time's sake, he whispered. He tossed the ball of paper into the flames. We watched it catch. The yellow paper curled and blackened. The words of the woman who had tried to destroy us turned to ash and smoke rising up the chimney to be scattered by the winter wind. He closed the stove door with a clang. Do we have any cocoa? He asked, turning back to me. I think we do, I said. I went to the cupboard and got the tin of cocoa powder and 2 heavy ceramic mugs. I heated milk on the stove. We didn't say anything else about Kylie or Buck or the house in Grosse Pointe. They were gone. They were ghosts. I poured the hot chocolate and handed a mug to my son. We walked to the window and looked out at the frozen lake. The sun was trying to break through the clouds, casting a pale light on the ice. It is going to be a good year, Dad, Trayvon said, taking a sip. I put my hand on his shoulder. I felt the muscle there solid and real. Yes, it is, son, I said. We stood there, 2 men who had been through the fire and come out the other side tempered and strong. The nightmare was over. The winter was cold, but we were warm. And for the first time in a long time, the silence wasn't empty. It was peace. And to you listening to this story, remember this. I learned the hard way that silence can hide danger and pride can invite wolves. I thought staying quiet would protect my son, but it only delayed the truth. God taught me that love requires action, not excuses. I prayed to God for restraint when anger wanted to lead, and with God as my witness, justice came from patience, not rage. This was a family story about trust misplaced and lessons earned. In moments of family betrayal, don't assume loyalty is automatic. Speak sooner. Verify facts. Protect the people you love before damage becomes permanent. I tell you this as a warning, don't be like me. Don't wait for proof while harm is happening. Another family story can turn dark when comfort replaces vigilance and family betrayal thrives in the shadows. If this family story resonates, take it as counsel, not spectacle. Learn to draw boundaries, keep records, and choose truth over appearances. In my life, family betrayal didn't arrive loudly. It smiled and asked for access. That's why wisdom matters more than wealth. If you're still here, share your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done differently? If this helped you, consider sharing it with someone who needs it. And subscribe for more reflections like this. Thank you for staying with me to the end. A final note, upcoming stories may include dramatized elements created for educational purposes. If that's not for you, feel free to exit now and choose content that fits you better.